How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.
this the end? There's a noise inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? I'm burning in the there's no place to hide. I'm burning in the what have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in the there's no place to hide. I'm burning in the
What up, everyone? Welcome to Spy Stream. Now, people might think, Karlyn, did you miss your 5 p.m. stream? No, I didn't miss my 5 p.m. stream because we're doing Spy Stream today. And our Spy Stream starts in about 15 minutes. So I didn't want to do a whole preamble. I just started the stream about a little bit later than I normally do. Welcome, guys. Welcome. Who's ready to go inside a live leftist training? And this is going to be a lot. This is going to be actually longer than our normal Spy streams. It's going to be about a 3-hour training. 3-hour training. And we'll see how long we make it through it, because normally I do Spy streams as a supporter exclusive. I have been doing them more publicly lately because some of the organizations that have been doing Spy streams, like I don't think they actually really care that I make their training public. So I think they're okay with it. So I don't think they're going to give me problems. For people who don't know, for people who might be new and you're like, what is this Spy stream thing? Well, I have a handy dandy reference for you. Spy stream is when we go inside a live leftist training. This is live. I don't know what they're going to say. I don't know what they're going to do. We are going into their private Zoom call. We are watching the Zoom call. We are doing it all together. We do not disrupt their training ever. We don't make nonsense in the chat. That just gets you kicked out anyway. It doesn't actually do anything. All we do is we sit and we listen to their training. Now, for some reason, sometimes when I do Spy stream publicly on the internet, leftists really don't like it because they don't actually like people seeing what they talk about behind closed doors. I know that we are all shocked at this revelation that the left doesn't like people seeing what they talk about behind closed doors. There we go. And so we are watching a live training. I don't know what they're going to say or do. I don't know if it's going to be interesting or boring. It really could be either. We could sit here for 3 hours and nothing eventful happens, or we could sit here and we see some of the craziest stuff we've ever seen in our lives. We do not know what's going to happen. So because it is live, sometimes there are technical difficulties. Sometimes there are technical difficulties on my end. If there are technical difficulties, I will try to take care of them as quickly as I can. Sometimes there are technical difficulties on their end, because what we have learned over the years of watching the far left is that many of them have no effing clue how to use technology. And so there may be technical difficulties difficulties on their end. I can't control that. I can't turn their volume up. I can't turn their volume down. I can't fix the volume on your computer either. We just have to be flexible because this is a live training and we don't exactly know what's going to happen. I will not be doing commentary over the training because this is my recording too. But I might type comments in the chat, just like on YouTube. And I might, if it's a good opportunity, show the comment on the screen, or I might just type comments in the chat. I invite all you guys to type comments in the chat as well as we are making our way through the presentation. You're more than welcome to do that. If you decide to send in a super chat, I would really appreciate it. I will not be acknowledging it during the stream, though. I will, however, acknowledge it at the end. And I will thank you for your donation to the cause because you guys are the ones that fund the work I'm doing. Of course, I cannot spend all my time exposing the far left without you guys. So if you feel free to send in a super chat to support my work, or if you feel so inclined, please, do so. Or even better, you can head over to my Substack, which is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com, and sign up for a membership of $8 a month, $80 a year. Substack is the very best way to support the work I'm doing. A link to Substack is pinned to the top of my chat on YouTube and Rumble. It is in the description below. If you're watching on X, find it in my bio. You can, it's my name. It's right here. It's right here. And then you just subscribe to it and you can pay me money, or you can subscribe for free and that's fine too. And if you can't afford to financially support my work, I totally get it. Please share my work. Please help me expand my audience because that will help me bring in more people who can afford to pay for the work because someone's got to pay for it. It's got to get paid for somehow. I am 100% independently funded by people who appreciate these deep dives into the far left. Thank you guys for allowing me to do what I do. I think it's crazy that I get to wake up every day and cover the far left, but it's awesome. So what are we going to be doing tonight? What are we going to be spy streaming? Well, we are going to be going inside an organization. Hey, Suzanne. Just saying hi. Thanks for your hard work and suffering. Yes, I suffer for all of you. Okay, thank you for the super chat. I'm volunteering at a Lutheran school this summer. I found a kid's socialist book, Click Clack Moo. In one of the classrooms, I explained to the teacher at the school that it was socialist and she freaked out and threw it out. I've never heard of this. Click Clack Moo. I'm going to take a screenshot of that, and I'm going to look up that book later. Thank you, LK, for the super chat. I really appreciate it. So what are we going inside today, guys? We are going inside, not that one, this one. We are going inside the training from an organization called Freedom Trainers. Now, this website doesn't look like much, and I honestly feel like they've just launched this website. I feel like this is a brand new organization. But the reason that I know about this organization is they've been participating in the post-No Kings protest stuff. And so the people that I've seen talk in the No King stuff, they seem more socialist to me than many other people that are involved in the No King stuff. Like one of the organizers, and I think we're going to see her tonight. She's a white woman. We actually saw her on a spy stream on Monday. She's extremely leftist. And so I don't know, man. I kind of feel like this Freedom Trainers thing is more Democratic Socialists of America than anything else, but their website is very sparse. Look, they have the fist under request a training. They have a whole library of non-cooperation material. We should probably take a look at this. They've got like open source stuff. So their whole thing is about how do you participate in non-cooperation for protest, which they consider to be the most effective. Oh, look at this. Look at all these trainings they have. I didn't realize. Oh, these are their slides. I didn't realize they had all their slides online. That's a nice little find for us. Okay, and with the $10 super chat is in one of the pictures you took of the... Oh! Wow. So I took a picture of a socialist book in a socialist bookstore at a socialist conference a couple years ago, and now that book is in schools everywhere. Isn't that nice? See, people think I make such a big deal out of the socialist books because people are like, Karlyn, socialists are funded from George Soros. And I'm like, no, actually, socialists are funded by book publishing. like in the real world, socialists publish a metric F ton of books. And at the socialism conference that I went undercover at, they had a whole children's section. And apparently LK paid very close attention to the books that I showed you guys from the children's book section at the socialism conference. And now apparently those books are showing up in public schools. Yay! It's kind of like I'm years ahead of everyone else on the internet. You're welcome. It's tough always being the first for everything, but someone's got to do it. And I suppose, I suppose that someone can be me. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Thank you, LK, for letting me know. I really do appreciate it. So we're going to go inside what I think is their very first public training, a 3-hour non-cooperation workshop. And it's going to be great. And hopefully they don't catch us and kick us out. Now, obviously, I'm not registered for this under my real name, so they would have to maneuver to try to find me. I don't know how many people are signed up for it, but I guess we'll see. But 3 hours on how this is, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this publicly is the people from this Freedom Trainers organization have been showing up a lot since the No Kings protests, and I think this might be the direction that we can expect to see the left going in for the rest of the summer. Also, there's another training that I just heard about. Can I show this to you guys without can I show something to you guys without showing you my email and doxing my fake socialist name is the question. Can I actually do this? Let me see. Hang on. Hey Noah, thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Let me see if I can show you guys this without doxing something I don't want you to see. Okay. There is another training this week coming up tomorrow actually, which is called Workers Over Billionaires from May Day to Labor Day. So this is again this is the left saying we're not just protesting one time, we are protesting all summer long. And so what I think we're going to see in this training today, I think what we're going to see is here is the strategy for the rest of the summer so that we know ahead of time here's exactly what the left is going to be doing, here's what we can expect from them. And they're telling us tomorrow that we're going to continue this through Labor Day. This is a whole summer affair. I don't know how else to interpret that. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight, and I hope you guys appreciate it. Let's see. Let me get the stream up. Let me just get up the Zoom, and then I can let you guys know when I get let in. Oh shit. Hang on.
Oh, now I think I'm ready to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes it will.
We're just chilling, guys. There's no sound or anything. We're chilling.
Hey, Daniel, just trying to call back. This is Phineas.
Guys, please mount the like button for me. Like the video. Please subscribe while you still can, while I can still talk. Make sure you're subscribed. Please. Thank you.
Hey, welcome everybody who's joined us so far. We'll be starting in a few minutes. So get yourself a glass of water, settle in, and we're glad you're here.
Yeah, we're glad we're here too. We're glad we're here too. Welcome everyone. That we are going inside a live leftist training today. I might be doing another stream later too. I may be doing a drama stream later, just programming note. I'm not 100% sure that I want to do it yet. Maybe doing a drama stream later. If I do it, no one can hold it against me because I have things I want to say on the internet. It's not exactly a nitwit, it's a response to something that happened last night that I probably shouldn't be responding to. And I will say flat out, I should not be responding to it. I really shouldn't be responding to it. But I have things I want to say on the internet based on something I heard said last night that I'm not happy about. Well, I guess I'm not happy about it. It's just like I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed. And it's been a prolonged issue of annoyance. And I've had enough. I have reached my point of having enough. So I may do it, I may not do it. I don't know. It's fine. It doesn't suck that bad, actually, but we're just waiting for the training to get started, guys. I'm just gossiping in the meantime. Let's just say the topic of the drama stream, his name starts with big and ends with tech. And so if someone wants to tell him, please feel free to do so. And if you don't want to tell him, that's fine too. But he knows. Yeah, everyone's like, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. It's not my fault he talked about me on his stream last night. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. He never does anything wrong. I actually didn't do anything wrong in this case. It's not my fault. And I have things I want to say on the internet. And I may or may not do it. I don't know. I'm still kind of 50-50 about it. Do I want to lower myself again to engage in this bullshit again? Well, no, but I'm also tired of this shit and I have things I want to say on the internet. Okay. Is he a Pisces? Yep. He's not the Pisces. He's not Pisces number 1. But he is in fact one of the infamous 3 Pisces. Yes, he is. So someone can go into his DMs and alert him now, and so he can freak out, worrying if I'll do it or not. Is he Pisces number 2 or 3? He is Pisces. He is either Pisces number 2 or 3. I will say that. He is either Pisces number 2 or 3. He's just not Pisces number 1. Which is going to offend him probably, by the way. He is not actually number 1 in this case. Yeah, 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish. Exactly. No, I can't click on that. It's a Zoom thing, Bob. Yeah. Well, the ironic thing about Pisces number 1 is he's not even actually a Pisces. He's a Virgo that has a Pisces moon and a Pisces rising. So he acts like a Pisces, but he's not actually a Pisces, but he's extra Pisces because of the other placements. And so I call him a Pisces because he actually, in some cases, acts more Pisces than actual Pisces. But he is, in fact, not a real Pisces. He's a Virgo, which I also attract like flies. And, you know, Virgos tend to be fine. I get along well with Virgos. I love Virgos. But that extra Pisces, it's like... Anyway. Yes, there are actually people who do know what I'm talking about, and I'm talking to those people. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. We're waiting for the training to start. How do Pisces act? They swim around aimlessly like little fishes, never making a decision and psyching themselves out and talking themselves out of the things that they should be doing if they're being responsible, but they're not being responsible because they're just swimming around like little fishes going, ah. Pisces are fine except when they have to deal with an Aries, and then they're going to drive the Aries insane with their bullshit. We're just waiting for the training to start, guys. If you don't know what I'm talking about, really don't worry about it. It's really not important. I'm just talking before the stream gets started. Yeah, green-eyed lady's a Capricorn. Capricorn are just as bad, honestly.
Hey, hey everyone. Welcome. Thanks for coming. We just hit 300 people. We're really excited that y'all are here tonight. We are going to get started in just 1 minute. And if you could just stand by for that 1 minute, we are going to get started. Okay, everyone, welcome again. Thank you so much for being here. The numbers are still rising. We're at about 325 folks. We are so glad that you can join us tonight. My name is LJ. I use she, her pronouns. I'm here in Brooklyn, New York, and I am part of the Freedom Trainer crew. The Freedom Trainers are a group of people with social movement experience, a lot of experience in
recording in progress.
We are recording. So thanks for that. Just so folks know, we are recording. We are a group of folks that have experience in social movements and a lot of nonviolent action experience. And we've come together since Trump was elected to help share this analysis, these strategies, and these tactics. So thank you so much for joining us. I am going to just get us started with some power and purpose and why we're here tonight. So I hope everyone can just take a minute to appreciate themselves for showing up. All facets of society right now, from our government to the oligarchs to the elites, are telling us that there is nothing that we can do, that we're too small, that we're too powerless, that we're ill-equipped to handle this moment. And you showing up here tonight is a really important action that we hope will spur more action to resist this moment. So thank you so much for being here. I would love for my other trainers to just come on camera, excuse me, just so that everyone can see your faces. So I'm here with Tabitha, give a wave. I'm here with Nadine, give a wave. And Daniel's here also, give a wave. And shout out to Phineas, who is off camera, but is doing all of the tech things right now. So we are going to just do a little bit of housekeeping. I want to offer a few group agreements. The first is that we're going to try to hold this space as a confidential space, in the sense that we just want to respect what people share here. That might be easier than we thought it was going to be because we're having some difficulty with the chat box. So it might be, in fact, that it's actually quite easy to remain confidential here. The second is that we just want to encourage y'all to think for yourself, speak for yourself. All of our contexts are different. Again, this is maybe something that requires engagement with the chat box. So thanks so much for your grace as we adapt and try to get that up and running. And lastly, just we invite you to come open-minded, open-hearted, ready to learn. And you should expect to leave with some questions. This is by no means going to be a definitive guide to authoritarianism and how to fight it, but we think this is a pretty good start. So the goals for tonight, I'm not sure if we can get that slide up. It's slide 8, Phineas.
And maybe LJ, I'm just going to jump in for a second. For folks, there are a lot of folks saying that they can't see anything. We are hoping that you can see the slides, and there are 5 boxes of us. If for some reason you can't see us, try placing your cursor over the dividing line between the slide deck and the presenters. And if you make that side with the presenters big enough, you'll see us all. We will take turns presenting different parts, so you don't need to see us all at once. So having answered that, I hope we can, that answers the 13 questions in the Q&A right now. Go ahead, LJ, back to you.
Okay, great. Awesome. So like I said, this is not going to be a definitive answer to what is happening politically right now and how we can resist it, but it is a really good start. So our goals for tonight are that we are going to examine the authoritarian threat. We're going to learn how non-cooperation works with stories and examples. We're going to learn a tool called the Pillars of Support that feels particularly useful for understanding how the government is operating right now and how we, the people, can resist it. And then lastly, we want to use these tools and analyses to understand how we can do the most powerful forms of non-cooperation possible. So we're going to be introducing you to strategies and tactics of non-cooperation. And I just want to end with a little quick story about from a writer that I love named James Scott. James Scott wrote an essay about how he was in college and he did a study abroad summer in Germany in a tiny, tiny, tiny little town. And in that town, there was one street. And on that one street, there was a mail truck that went at 9 a.m. and there was a milk truck that went at 3 p.m. During the day, there was no other traffic, but the town put in a stoplight. And he noticed that everybody didn't walk, even though they knew that the mail truck had gone and the milk truck wasn't coming for hours. They still obeyed the traffic light. So we're really glad that you're here. We think this is the first step in cultivating a sense of non-compliance, a sense of tolerance, and a sense of resistance for meeting the moment. Because there will come a time where things are going to be asked of you and they're going to be big, and we want you to be ready. It's going to be bigger than disobeying the traffic light. It's going to be more meaningful. It's going to be more powerful. And we're really excited to accompany you as you get started. So I'm going to pass it to Tabitha.
Awesome. Thanks, LJ. And actually, if we can skip forward past the grounding slides, we're, again, making changes on the fly as we don't have access to chat. And we're going to do some spectrograms and ask for folks to take some polls. So if we can go to our first slide. Love to have folks reflect on this statement. We have experienced authoritarianism in the US before. We have experienced authoritarianism in the US before. And think about where you may fall on the spectrum of 1 being disagree and 5 being agree. Phineas, if we could go ahead and tee up that first poll, love to see kind of how folks are feeling in the room. And I see some folks saying that we can only see one speaker at a time. Thanks for letting us know. We'll make sure to reintroduce ourselves as we talk. So while Phineas is looking on the the polling. I'll just say again, I'm Tabitha, a member of the Freedom Trainers, and I am based in DC. Okay, great. All right, we are including all 3 questions of the poll at once. So this is the first question that we're going to orient ourselves around. Can we go to the next slide? The second question, or I guess statement, is authoritarianism emerges from inequality. So again, think about how much you agree or disagree with that statement and what kind of number you would associate that with. And then, can we go to the next slide? No judgment at all with this statement, but want to know how folks are feeling in the room on, we can do this. So if you can go ahead and again assess, agree, or disagree based on how you're feeling, this will give us an idea of who's in the room. We'll give folks a couple minutes to do this. All right. And Phineas, if you can see on the back end how many folks are voting, if you can go ahead and start closing the poll. So if you haven't voted, go ahead. And I know it's hard sometimes, but just go with your first gut instinct. And then if we can close so we can show the poll. And since we don't have the chat, I'll ask for some interaction with my co-facilitators here as we're seeing how people are assessing. So it looks like we got quite a bit of agreement on at some level of agreement on whether folks think that we've experienced authoritarianism in the US before, which is very similar to how things show up in other workshops we've done.
Yeah, it's pretty good too. Also, 321 of you out of 391 of you participated. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Looks like we also got quite a bit of agreement, even more agreement on authoritarianism emerges from inequality.
Yep, about 83% of you thought about this.
Mhm.
You were agree or on number 4 or 5.
Yeah. And I also love that people are at least on the more agree end of the spectrum for we can do this. So, despite some of the challenges and the really dire news coming out of this past weekend and week, just seeing that we do have a sense of power and a feeling of agency, and that we can do this together is always great to see. And our hope is that after this training, folks' agreement with this statement actually goes up, and we're actually connecting even more around the things that we can do together and how we can better leverage our power together. So if we can go to the next slide. All right, so before we get into more in depth into the non-cooperation content, we wanted to make sure that we were all starting from a similar place and really orienting ourselves to this moment and understanding the threat that we're facing. We can go to the next slide. And you could just skip so that all of these are showing. Phineas, thank you. So hopefully folks here have seen some version of this, and that this is no surprise. This is the authoritarian playbook. There are things that we know that people do and authoritarians do to try to maintain power. And this is a playbook that is shared by folks all around the world to be able to divide and conquer folks who are really trying to push for more, participation and democratic governance. And so, as I'm reading out these different techniques and tactics, and these are by no way all of them, just think in your head when you may have seen this show up in your community, in the country, or in other places in the world. Authoritarians will direct investigations against critics. When have you, seen this showing up in the U.S. and around the world? I know, for me in particular, I'm thinking about the number of investigations that are being opened for nonprofits and NGOs who are taking certain stances on foreign policy issues or on protecting our immigrant brothers and sisters. Giving license to lawbreaking is another tactic. What's coming up to mind for you? I know for me, I'm thinking about the January 6th pardons, or the pardons of the January 6th insurrectionists. Other things they may too, regulatory retaliation. They may deploy the military domestically. We saw this a couple of weekends ago and what has been continuing in LA, which I know LJ will talk about a little bit later. Federal law enforcement overreach. I think many of us see this in how ICE is showing up in our communities. And the autocrat won't leave. So even thinking back to our own January 6th and the fact that we have already heard a lot of murmurings about a potential attempt at a third term. So we can go to the next slide. And again, we see this showing up in different places in the world and in the US, whether it is in Brazil, when shortly after our own January 6th, then President Jair Bolsonaro tried to convince supporters to storm the Congress and Supreme Court as part of an attempted coup, going again, using the military domestically, which also happened in Tunisia in 2021 to expand current President Kais Saied's power, and then keep going. One more slide. Thank you. And then we also see this in how people try to co-opt the courts and try to use the courts and the judiciary in their favor. So just thinking about headlines, both from the last Trump administration and even now, really going after judges who are taking a stand against the unconstitutionality of deportation orders, or thinking about the co-optation of the Hungarian judiciary system by President Orban. So we can go to the next slide. So I think some folks have probably heard of the phrase democratic backsliding. Refers to state-led debilitation or elimination of political institutions that support a functioning democracy, essentially towards a more authoritarian system. Folks have assessed that we're in various stages of democratic backsliding in what would have been deemed as strong democracies around the world, including ours. And when it occurs and is actually successful, it's often fatal to democracy. Over the last 120 years, 68% of the countries that experienced a backslide actually broke down into authoritarianism. And there's a short period of time that we're working in where we actually have the ability to try to make things turn around. So we know that in the past 30 years, things have been better, where 54% of countries have been able to make a U-turn. And it's important to note that when we say U-turn here, it's not just making a U-turn to go back to where that democracy was, but it's actually making a U-turn to go into a deeper level and depth of democracy. And in each of those cases, popular movements was the key driving factor. So we can go to the next slide. So just to give you a bit more of the data, what we know is from looking at 35 cases from 1991 to 2021, the cases that didn't have a civil resistance movement were only successful 7.5% of the time, whereas with a civil resistance movement, we're looking at a little bit over half of the time. So what makes that happen? I think one thing that's important, some folks have probably seen this 3.5 number when it comes to movements and how they've been able to win. And the simplest thing is, people have said from the research that if movements have been able to engage 3.5% of the population, then they have been successful. And that is true to some extent. There have been cases where that, there's been one case at least where that actually didn't play out. But I think the important thing to note from this number is it's really about the quality of participation and the sustaining of that participation that matters. There have been so many movements around the world that have been successful without reaching this level of participation, but it's about how they're engaging different people within society who can reach other folks within society, and really like the credibility that folks have that matters. And that folks aren't just looking at one particular protest or one particular march, but they're really looking at people showing up in numbers over a long period of time. So if we can go to the next slide, I think I'm handing it over to Daniel.
Great. Hey, everyone. My name is Daniel Hunter. I've been working with Choose Democracy, and we've been, for about a year, exploring the question of like what happens if Trump wins, to kind of help us think through some of the pieces around that. And so one of the pieces that we're that Tabitha is bringing us into is the idea that we have to build a civil resistance movement, that it's just not going to resolve itself through elections. That's a atypical strategy. It doesn't mean that elections aren't an important piece, but that we have to be integrating a bunch of other sort of people power strategies. And so we just want to ask ourselves, so what is this? What is a civil resistance movement? What is a people power movement? And we define people power very simply. So it's waging struggle for political, economic, or social objectives without the use of a threat of violence. It can include protests, sit-ins, strikes, boycotts, civil disobedience, constructive interventions. And so it's the mechanism by which people apply our pressure without asking permission. So it's different than other kinds of actions that we might be more familiar with, that are kind of suggestive. So you've seen it. We've struggled a little bit with tech on this call. So you'll see a slide that says like write in the chat. And if you can write in the Q&A, that's great. If you're not able to do it, it'll still work. What we want to do is just kind of like have you think for a second about, well, even before getting into just kind of marking some of the literature that Erica and Maria, that Tabitha mentioned earlier. What are some of the pieces that make people power successful? So this question that someone just raised about, like, so what do we need in order to do it? So some of the pieces that the research says in terms of building people power for an authoritarian movement in particular: large, diverse participation from different sectors and groups in society. So every movement I've ever been part of wants that, but it doesn't necessarily mean we've always been that great at organizing it. And in some ways where it's a different time, and I think in some ways maybe you can feel it, which is I've never been in a moment in which I've felt such, just for me personally, such connection to Harvard, of like, oh, Harvard is in it with me in a way, or different institutions of society, the American Bar Association, which is now pushing back against Trump constant overreach. And that is a reformation, that as what an authoritarian does is they do so much overreaching that in fact more people have to be involved in it. So we're already getting some of that in some ways, but it means that we have to manage those constructive tensions. We need to center relationships and prioritize a larger collective goal. We kind of talk about two elements. There's the no portion, which is like, what is it that we're against? The no kings may be an easy way to describe that, which is all of us who believe that we should not have a king in this country. And then what are we fighting for? And sometimes the no comes first, as in most anti-authoritarian struggles, that's the thing that's the easiest to kind of focus on. And then over time, we start to get into more of the yeses. So we get into that unifying vision of tomorrow. But I'm not anxious at this moment in time that we don't have that yet. That typically needs some time to work for, and we're in a lot of response mode. And then loyalty shifts. What we're looking for is changing of who are the different pillars. Well, LJ is going to talk a little bit more about pillars of support. And expanding the repertoire of our tactics. And we're emphasizing nonviolent tactics because of the literature does suggest that movements that rely more heavily on nonviolent tactics as opposed to ones that are violent, because of it need to be highly diverse in who's participating. And in that sense, if a movement is to pick one sort of an armed struggle revolution, there's less people who are up for it, less people who are willing to sort of participate in that kind of action. And so in fact, having a wider range. And the literature tends to say, even if it's mixed, so much attention, there's a group of 100,000 people in the streets and 20 people use violence, that tends to be a dissuading tactic for other people to be in it. So training in nonviolent discipline matters. Our ability, I think we could even say whether you're armed or not armed, just so many, you need an amount of discipline. We can pull off this thing, and this is what we're trying to do. Violence, de-escalation, figuring out how do we handle the repression that comes. Authoritarians are comfortable with violence. That's their bottom line. It's the thing that they know. So we want to ask you just to think, and again, tech thing being what it is, you won't be able to chat in a normal way. Maybe you can do the Q&A, or maybe you can just think to yourself. But just try to think for a moment of like, what's an effective action that you've been part of or that you've heard about? So a tactic or an action that you've participated in that felt effective. Maybe again, if you're some people in this chat, in the whatever 300 some people who are here, some of you 400 people, excuse me, some of you are very activists and have done many things, and some of you are new, and so maybe you've only heard about different movements. So already people are posting in Tesla protest, people talking about protest in the streets. Some people mentioning marches, boycotts. Many different actions out there. Civil disobedience being mentioned, strikes, commercial boycotts. What else? Donating money to different organizations, joining marches, No King's March, overpass visibility actions. I think some of you may have seen these things where over highways. I think the first one I'm aware of was in my great state of New Jersey that I live in now. But people have been posting messages. Elon has your tax data or something like that. So love that people are posting in. And I just want you to kind of think for a moment about what made it effective. And as you're thinking about that, what is the thing that made it effective? I just want to give you kind of categorization of some different kinds of actions that are out there. So one kind of action is called symbolic actions. So those are actions that like raise awareness of an issue. They're designed to persuade a target to do something in a particular kind of way. So examples of that are marches, rallies, vigils, street theater, letter writing, petition. I think someone mentioned giving money, skywriting, mock awards, stop lobbying, mock elections, bird dogging, etc. All of these are actions that we do. Even some civil disobedience actions can still be that, where we're maybe just, our goal is to be so annoying or so overwhelming or so many numbers that we're hoping that's persuasive. And in a democracy, the number of people who march matters an incredible amount, because they look and they say, oh, voters, that matters to me. When you don't have such a strong democracy, then, or when you're in an authoritarian regime, which all of us have experienced working in or training in authoritarian regimes, when you're in that, it doesn't matter so much, actually. The authoritarian doesn't necessarily care about numbers because it's all about pure power. And so then we may have to rely on other kinds of tactics. And of course, symbolic action matters greatly to inspire us, to mobilize, to get new people involved, but we can't alone. That's not on its own. So we also need tools of non-cooperation. So non-cooperation is to undermine the authority of an unjust system by disrupting it, refusing to cooperate with it, getting right in the way of it, making it harder or impossible for the system to keep its unfair policy. So that includes actions like worker strikes, boycott. Some people mentioned the Tesla takedown, which Tesla takedown was very much built around, we're going to brand Tesla so heavily that people won't want to buy Tesla, which is exactly what happened, right? $100 billion. And so as a result, Tesla was losing huge amounts of money. I think the number was $150 billion that Elon Musk lost in terms of his economic money. And so that's a direct economic non-cooperation. And rent strikes, tax refusal, changing bathroom signs yourself, jury conscientious objection, et cetera, et cetera. So those are all some examples of non-cooperation tactics. And what happens in non-cooperation is it's not a symbolic action. It's not a request. It's insistence on. There's another version of action. We'll spend a little bit less on this, exploring it, but also alternative cooperation. So building alternative institutions or policies by acting as though it's already in place, and as a sort of direct challenge to the current systems and policies. It's another way of doing non-cooperation, as a way of thinking of it. And so we can kind of combine them a little bit. So examples of that are like land seizures, where people take over a plot of land that otherwise is not seen as theirs. Occupation of buildings. Workers sometimes, for example, in some authoritarian fights, have occupied work sites as a way to build their power. So not just a strike. Lech Walesa in Poland, for example, was involved in a very high profile example of that, where they went in and they kept, rather than leaving their place of occupation, they stayed there and they actually occupied the factories. And that was also shut down. So there's economic pressure about it, but it was also, they began building their own democratic structures at the same time. Guerrilla gardening, building your own alternative elections. I use the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party as an example. So I just want to invite us to go back to the question, at the action that you shared. What kind of action was it? Was it symbolic? Was it non-cooperation? Was it building alternatives? And just to get in your head, you don't even have to share it in the chat, but just to get in your head, what are the different things that you thought of? And when we've done this activity, we've noticed many, many of the examples that people come up with, that a good number of them are trend towards symbolic actions as opposed to non-cooperation. And so for that reason, we're going to spend a little bit more time just kind of digging into non-cooperation as a particular stratagem. Because what we've found, and what the research bears out, is that movements that rely purely on symbolic action with pushing against the authoritarian regime, they're important, don't get us wrong. Everything we're saying here is many things are going to be needed. But if that's only what we're relying on, that we tend to be less effective than movements that also engage in non-cooperation. So we do want to be cheerleaders. People are doing a tremendous amount. And just since many of us have sort of heard some version of, we haven't done as much as sort of last time, or there's been a sort of media story that was developed very early that we haven't done as much as last time. It's just not true. And so the data people in our midst, there's a group called the Crowd Consortium, and they've been tracking how many people have been doing protests. And so this is even before the June actions, and doesn't include the spike of another 5 million plus people who are participating. But this is just looking at, there's been way more protests. You can see that line, that curve, way more protests in 2025 than there's been in 2017. And we're somewhere around almost 3 times as many protests as have happened. And that number keeps increasing, both in volume, in numbers of protests, of different kinds of protests, and the range of tactics. And that's one thing we just want to highlight, that there have been lots of people doing not just marching in the streets, but also different kinds of non-cooperation. So where they're not just, again, symbolic action, but they're refusing to cooperate or comply with requests, demands, or orders. So one of the early examples of this was Phyllis Fong. And her story didn't get to be well known, but I do love her story. She was a USDA Inspector General and was told by Trump, "You're fired." And she looked at her chain of command and said, "That's not who fires me." So she refused to go and declared it an illegal order and said, "I've taken the position that these termination notices, they just don't comply with the requirements set out in law, and therefore they are not effective." So she didn't just do it, she acted like, so it wasn't just a action in court that she went to, though she, I believe, also did that, but she just refused to accept the illegal orders. Another example of it coming out of grassroots folks had been refusing to accept polite decorum. All these town halls. I've so enjoyed watching these town halls. Sometimes when I'm feeling a little down, I Google what's the latest town hall and watch primarily Republicans getting yelled at, but Democrats too, about what are you actually doing? What are you up to? And the non-cooperation aspect of it is they're not just raising their hands saying, "I have a question," but they're getting their voice in there. So refusing to act as though a normal thing is happening. This is not normal times. And they're refusing to act like it. And so that is, again, part of the non-cooperation, which is both in how they're acting and relating to their elected officials and how they are acting out in those events. So, lovely. Another example, a bunch of you mentioned these, different boycotts. So there have been a whole bunch of different boycotts that have been going on. Some of you may have heard the February 28th economic boycott that happened. This is that one that was like kind of just on social media. There was no clarity about, it wasn't even clear to me as someone who was reading a lot, what it was all about or the goals or whatnot. And yeah, it had a lot of participation. And in fact, it was the first one that sort of hit target, where Forbes magazine, a few days afterwards, began analyzing how much did this economic strike that people had said they were doing, what impact did it have? And Target sales were down by 11% on that day. And so Reverend Jamal O'Brien and Nina Turner have been folks who've been activating and supporting other kinds of boycotts. And they've been carrying on Target in particular, where I think Target has cost almost $12 billion in market value. The numbers fluctuate, obviously, from time to time. But again, we're in this interesting moment, which is a lot of people are participating. There's a lot of action. Some of us might be asking ourselves, is it already, like, are we winning? Is it effective? And of course not. That's not where we are. We're in an authoritarian takeover. We're in an authoritarian phase in which they're attempting to consolidate power. Our job is to slow it down. Our job, of course, is to stop it. But our job is, before you stop it, we have to slow it down. And so this activity is in what's a very uncomfortable phase, which is not wholly winning everything or much of things, but actually in the process of slowing down the authoritarian takeover so that it doesn't consolidate, it doesn't tighten up. And an example of that I think has been probably most useful for me in energy is noticing what's happened with Tesla, where many of us have watched. Tesla takedowns have been very effective. Lots of people putting a lot of pressure on Tesla. Even before there's training or organizing or a structure, people knew we're not going to buy Teslas. We're going to push against them. So there's already non-compliance with Tesla. And a group, Tesla Takedown, sort of helped organize and coordinate a bunch of that. And they jumped right in and began noting how many things were happening. And so they moved into this and began helping us articulate that we're in a boycott. We're putting pressure. There's multiple avenues. There's people protesting. In my town of Cherry Hill, there were blocks and blocks and blocks of people who are signaling we are not okay with Tesla. There are individuals who are selling their Tesla. There's a range of things, right? And so what we're having is that many people were already acting. It was almost an anarchist, if you can handle that mechanism of organizing to begin with. And they brought some coordination to it. And that what happened is that there's enough pressure that Musk was getting called back by Tesla, the company, stockholders and so forth, saying, you have to return. It's too much, it's too much, it's too much. And so Trump and him were never going to be bosom buddies. They were always two, rich guys who were trying to control the universe and direct our lives up and down. So it was always a cleaving line between them. But actually, we split between them. And the Tesla takedown movement was able to pull Musk. We're largely responsible for being able to pull Musk out of government, which is huge. I just hope we can take a moment to acknowledge what a massive win, with a lot of asterisks, but a massive win it is to move the richest man ever in the history of in the history of everything, to get him out of government. And again, asterisks are relevant here. We did not win Doge. We did not win Palantir stepping in. We did not win. But the thing that's helpful for people to notice is, can we, who have very little influence, we're small, tiny people, can we do a thing? And it's true. When a lot of us do a little thing, we can cause big things to happen. So we've been tracking, some of us, there's a resource here of Resist List, different examples of collective non-cooperation that have been happening. And so if you don't catch this quickly, you can Google it, Resist List, and you'll find it on Blue Sky. But it's been a way to kind of track. There are many examples of non-cooperation, even before they reach sort of mainstream media. There are just many, many things happening. And just wanted to mark, and again, all these slides we'll share out so that you can have them afterwards. And we want to mark, as we're thinking about what kind of tactics of non-cooperation do we want to do, that there are three different categories. So social non-cooperation, political non-cooperation, and economic. And so social non-cooperation is, getting people to stop doing things that sort of are in normal society that support unfair leaders. So ignoring government holidays, shunning officials, using symbols or retaking symbols that we don't necessarily agree with folks in power. And so even the way that we held Flag Day, that vets were out front reclaiming Flag Day as a real patriotic symbol. These were examples of holding that. Political non-cooperation looks like people refusing to follow the rules or systems of government. We've been really seeing a lot of that from people inside government who've been resistant, people who got orders to like, was an example, people who got their orders, you may remember from Elon Musk, who told them 5 lines. Remember he said you have to report every week. What are the 5 things that you've been up to? And they said no, actually. As soon as this memo came out from the OMB, who sort of was the one who articulated this to 3 million some odd people, individuals began rapidly organizing on Signal. And they said, oh, we don't have to comply with this. And so they huddles, groups, tiny groups. And that then led to someone's on the chat who's saying, I didn't cooperate with the stupid bullets. I love it. And so people began organizing that. And then that trickled out to unions, AFG, NTEU, others who began adding like, yes, they also began saying you should not comply. And that then trickled to even some of the heads of sort of cabinet members. So sycophants like Patel and Rubio and others who began saying like, these are the things that we should, we also won't comply with this. And 2 things I want to just mark. One, that's the point at which the mainstream media began covering that story. So it wasn't at that smaller level. And that's a real disservice for us. And so they didn't catch the resistance until it was articulated by sort of elite actors. And that isn't where movements start. And that does us a disservice because it makes us feel less clear where our agency is. And our agency is we move our part, which moves a bigger, which moves a bigger, which moves a bigger, which moves a bigger. But it doesn't mean we necessarily move the hugest. So from the get-go. And the second thing I want to point out is that a lot of what we're able to do in that movement was effective by having a large base of people who were participating in it, a whole range. And so, in fact, in the end, somewhere between 1.5 or so million people participated in this act of noncompliance with these orders to do the 5-line emails, which makes it one of the largest acts of single non-cooperation in the history of the United States. Wasn't covered that way, but that's kind of the state we're in. So people we're in it. And political non-cooperation is one of the things. For those of us not in government, like myself, that may include things like not paying taxes or not listening to unjust orders. There's a bunch, LJ is going to talk about stories from LA that have been in that. But again, what I'm trying to do here is just mark, there's lots of different kinds of ways that we might have in on non-cooperation, lots of different angles that we can take. The last one here is economic non-cooperation, which often is some of the most effective and powerful, which is when we just stop giving them money. I mean, the primary drive for many of these players is money and power. And money is often power itself. So we don't continue to give them money or we don't continue to work to those. So those are often like boycotts, strikes, not paying rent, etc. That set of actions that people have done. So in order to understand just a little bit why non-cooperation works, how it's effective, we're going to go into a theory about pillars of support. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to you, LJ. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Daniel. So in order to understand how non-cooperation works, we really need to understand power. And I'm going to start us off with this quote by Alice Walker, that the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. And that's really going to be our guiding principle for understanding how power works within the framework of the pillars of support. So the pillars of support is a way of looking at how power moves in society that's different, I think, from a lot of the ways that we've learned to think about power. We often think about power as being at the top with the government, with elites, with the decision makers, with big institutions and big industries, and that somehow it kind of trickles down to regular people. What Alice Walker is reminding us is that actually we ourselves are agents of power, and that we need to be looking at power in a way that empowers us to take action. So we're going to look at how power works with this pillars of support tool. So, like I said, oftentimes we think about power as being a top-down project, right? Power is concentrated at the top, and then it comes down and affects regular people. The way that Gene Sharp presented the idea of power is actually as an inverted triangle, right? And that actually it's regular people who prop up society by giving their consent, by participating in daily life, by paying taxes, by enforcing laws, by obeying laws, keeping trains running, directing traffic, filling in roads, printing money, delivering food to markets, right? It's the things we do on the daily that actually enables society to continue to function, right? However, a lot of our tactics for protest are really predicated on this idea that power is concentrated at the top. And so a lot of grassroots activism relies on petitioning, persuading, or pressuring. And ultimately what that means is that we're asking for, or rather, oftentimes we're demanding that other people make decisions that affect our lives, right? That's what a lot of grassroots activism does. So we're really flipping the script here and saying that actually it's our participation in society that enables society to function. And so we're not going to ask anybody to change things for us. We're not going to even demand that people change things for us. We're going to change it for ourselves by pulling the rug right out from under those who have power. Okay? So what we're doing here with non-cooperation and non-compliance is we're directly shifting the balance of power in society. And we do that by changing patterns. We do that by changing buying patterns, working patterns, behavior patterns. Daniel just outlined the 3 different kinds of non-cooperation. They're social, political, economic, right? So the way in which we flex our power is by changing our patterns, right? Where we put our money, where we put our work, where we put our time, where we put our respect, and where we put our participation. So to concretize this idea of the pillars of support, we're going to look at this image. So here we have government, or what we have right now, which is a regime up at the top. Up at the top also we have a consolidations of elite in both the private and public sector. So we have these pillars of support that uphold this government, right? A pillar of support is the police. They enforce the laws. A pillar of support is media that tells the story of what happens in society. Businesses keep money flowing within society. Military enforces the society and quote unquote keeps the society safe internationally, right? Civil servants, we have federal workers. There are other pillars that if I had the chat box, I'd ask y'all to chime in about, but they also include religion. They also include education, academia, right? There are many ways in which we are actually organized into these pillars. And through those pillars, we give our consent and our participation to the government, right? We have power, and we, whether we know it or not, are consenting to participating in a government that oftentimes is not serving us. So what I want to do here is also show you that even within a pillar, there's actually quite a lot of differentiation, right? So the military is stratified. There's generals who have more power than officers, who have more power than soldiers, right? So these pillars are not monoliths, right? There's actually a way in which these pillars themselves are really organized often by class, experience, identity, right? And so we need to be looking at these pillars as not just everybody believes the same thing or everybody has the same experience, but rather complexify them. And I'm going to show you another tool to do that. Okay, so the work of non-cooperation is for us to chip away at these pillars, because ultimately what we're trying to get is a government or a regime that is unstable. And the more we chip away at these pillars, the more we get the whole house to topple. So that's what we're trying to do, right? And in order to do that, we're going to participate in non-cooperation. We're going to remove our consent, remove our action, remove our money. Okay. And it's important to note also that not all of these pillars have the same power position in upholding the system. Not all of these pillars are created equal in a way, right? Some have the potential to be far more disruptive than others. But we're going to invite you in a few minutes to consider what pillars you yourself are a part of. Okay. So we're going to take a few minutes and if you have a piece of paper, that's awesome. You can write this down, or maybe you want to just make notes about how to do this activity later on. But we want to know how you support the pillars, because as we're making this reorientation away from decision makers who control our lives and reorienting to ourselves as agents of power, we need to identify all of the ways in which we give our support to the current regime. So we want to know, where does your work fall in all of this? How does your work or your time contribute to upholding the pillars? Do you do work or get orders that conflict with your values? Do you comply? Will you face serious consequences if you don't? For example, people who are in state-run industries or civil servants, big industry or multinationals run by oligarchs, or big institutions such as academia. As Daniel mentioned, the economic power that we have is really big. So how do you economically support the pillars? You pay taxes, you purchase certain goods, you pay for services. And then there's kind of the cultural dimension of this, right? How do we give honor or respect that maybe inadvertently actually does uphold the pillars, right? Are there awards or pledges of allegiances, cultural pastimes, parades, right? How are we participating in this facet of society? Where do we participate in the unjust political system? Are we obeying laws that we believe are unjust, but because they're laws, actually we go along with them? Are we participating in business as usual? And really, just at the basic level, do we just continue to live a normal life in abnormal times? And then we really want you also to think about influence. Who do you encounter in your daily life that provides labor, money, or participation who could be organized into non-cooperation? And we want you to think about how you could support those relationships and take people into action, and not just take them into action, but sustain them into action, right? We're talking about taxi drivers, lawyers, service workers, tech workers, folks who, if organized and acting together, could affect the pillars. So we're going to give you a few minutes right now. Unfortunately, we don't have the chat box enabled, but if anybody wants to drop into the Q&A a pillar that they feel like they're a part of, that if chipped away at, it might cause the whole house to wobble a bit. Okay, I'm seeing some social clubs. Taxes for sure. Where our money goes, where our labor goes, right? Kathy's saying having to register for the selective service at 18, right? Participating in things that we're told we're supposed to do, right? where are we putting our money, right? Are we participating in our own repression by moving our money into big corporations, multinational corporations, corporations that might damage the planet, damage our communities? I'm seeing somebody who does computer work. Tech is a major pillar of this, right? Tech is enabling actually all these different facets of society to function. So if tech doesn't function, if the tech world doesn't function, a lot of these pillars then begin to get weak, right? So I see lots of answers coming in. Definitely a lot about moving money and yeah, being a consumer and recognizing the power that you have. I'm seeing churches should be talking about this. People are talking about religion. And also, I really just appreciate what somebody said in the chat box of just the way in which people are expected to be professional, right? And the way in which we kind of go along with business as usual rather than speak out. So we want to know, why do people obey, right? The truth is that we're just used to it. And the reality is that also we're quite afraid of what happens if we don't obey. There can be serious repercussions. We can be fired or we can be repressed. But also, there's a fear of repression that might, in fact, be more than the actual repression, right? The way authoritarianism works is to continually provide that threat of violence or that threat of repression. Sometimes we feel a moral obligation. We've all been taught that following orders is a good thing, is being a good citizen, is being a good person. And then sometimes there's a self-interest, right? Even if it might be detrimental or damaging to other people, we hope that it'll work out for us. In some cases, people psychologically identify with the ruler. Maybe there's an emotional tie there, or people aspire to attain a level of prominence that they believe that ruler embodies, which makes them identify with the ruler and actually not want to disobey orders because they're trying to appeal to that ruler. And also, in the world that we live in, where there is tons happening in every moment, it's hard to not feel indifferent sometimes. It's hard to not feel powerless. And it's hard to not feel confident sometimes, right? We feel inadequate to make our own decisions because we've been taught other people are better qualified and better able to make those decisions for us. So we've seen a lot of examples lately of people doing individual acts of non-cooperation, and we got some in the chat box or in the Q&A. But in order for these strategies to work, we need to be doing them at scale. So as Daniel mentioned, there was a one-day boycott of Target, right? There was Target felt that on one day. However, the Montgomery bus boycott was 381 days. So if we're trying to really hit people where it hurts, which is oftentimes in their pocket, we need to think about sustaining actions for much longer and with much bigger numbers of people. So in order to get to mass, we need millions of people to agree to a boycott. We need millions of people to call out sick on the same day. We need hundreds of thousands of kids to refuse to go to school, right? In order to really cause these pillars to crumble, what we need to do is act together, right? In mass. And what that means is we need to be practicing these muscles, but also be building to scale. Tabitha mentioned the research that says there's 3.5% of the population, that if 3.5% of the population can sustain action, right, there's a good chance that things will tip. But we need to get there. And in order to get there, we need to bring other people along with us. So I want to show a quick video. Oh, where's my video? Phineas, do you see the video on slide 45?
Yeah, let me see if I can pull that.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for bearing with us as we work through some of our tech difficulties. Hooray for the first time of everything, our first pancake, as someone I work with always says.
Phineas, if it's too much, no worries. We can, oh, Phineas is coming through. Here we go. Can folks hear? Hold on, Phineas, we don't have sound. Thank you all for being very cooperative in the
There's one other thing I want to say about, the ICE raids that we're seeing. And I want to make a comparison. And that is when I talk with my students about the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850 and how it pushed the nation closer to the brink of civil war because they began snatching people out of communities, people who had lived in communities or people who had escaped slavery. And my students are like, oh, so these people who came out against the Fugitive Slave Act were all abolitionists. And I said, no. These are people who could not countenance the idea of their neighbors being taken from them. The idea
that is such a good point.
The fundamental civic unit in this nation is neighbor. And that is the people who live in your community. Are you prepared to see them treated in this way? People simply were not.
I think the civic response to what we're seeing there is very encouraging in the same way, right? That as an abstraction, oh, I support mass deportation, get them all out of here. As a reality, your neighbor.
Your neighbor.
Thank you. Thanks, Phineas. You can go back to the slides. So for everyone who is asking, this is Jelani Cobb. And I wanted to show this example because Jelani Cobb is speaking about the ICE raids happening in Los Angeles and is making this comparison to the Fugitive Slave Act in the 1850s in order to show actually that most people who got activated in that moment were not beginning with an analysis where they were against slavery. Many people were not abolitionists, but as soon as they saw this level of violence happening, they started to kind of move in their orientation. They started to kind of move in their opinion. And so if we could get the slides back up, Phineas, thank you so much, Phineas. I want to show us the spectrum of allies. Okay, here we go. So what Jelani Cobb is talking about is that actually in the 1850s, there were abolitionists who were actively working to end the institution of slavery. Those were active allies. Those people were doing work on the daily to end the institution of slavery, right? There were other people maybe who felt like they supported that, but that they didn't put their energy towards it. There were people in the middle who were unsure about how they felt maybe about slavery. Maybe it benefited them, but maybe also they thought it was morally wrong, but they were kind of neutral on the issue. Then there are passive opponents. Passive opponents are people who maybe are benefiting from the institution of slavery and are quite happy with that. But maybe they don't own slaves. Our active opponents are not just maybe slave owners, but people who are actively working to maintain the subjugation of Black people, right? Our active opponents are people who are actively doing work that is against the work we're doing. So I wanted to show this tool because basically the spectrum of allies is a really handy tool that shows us how we can build power by shifting groups towards us while also undermining our opponent's support, right? So we want to move people from a neutral zone into being allies. It might mean that they're not just, it might mean that they're not quite ready for action. They might be a passive ally, right? But then we're moving the passive allies into active allies, people who are actively resisting the regime. Right? And so we want you to use this tool to think about who in your life you might need to move. And the other way in which to use this tool is that we can examine the pillars. I'm going to go back to the pillars for a second. We can examine the pillars and actually apply this tool to the pillars to see who might be more movable than others, right? ICE, for instance, is an organization that are active opposition. Right? ICE agents are currently kidnapping people. There might be people in that group of agents who feel that this is morally wrong, but they're still actively participating in it, right? The National Guard, however, is a much more diverse group of people. And we have seen in other moments of movement upsurge, where we've seen members of the National Guard actually come over to be passive allies or active allies in resisting something that they felt was unjust. So these pillars we just want you to remember are not monoliths, and that we encourage you to use the tool of the spectrum of allies also to really analyze where you think people can move from. And part of the amazingness of non-cooperation is that it's really contagious. And so I want to just talk about Los Angeles for a few minutes. In Los Angeles, we're seeing all kinds of courageous action right now. At the center, we see people who are forming human chains, blocking ICE vehicles from removing people from their homes. I'm sure many people have seen images like this, videos like this, have heard about action that everyday people are taking to protect their neighbors. As Jelani Cobb said, there's something that's fundamentally different about seeing your neighbors being taken out of their homes, right? That might make the issue that previously felt abstract really concrete. And maybe people felt like, I think immigration's a little bit out of control. I might want some reform there, but they didn't realize it was going to look like that. And once they realized that what immigration crackdown looks like is people being taken out of their home, they might move really into a kind of more passive ally position. And from there, ideally into a more active ally position. So I want to show a few other examples of non-cooperation. Tow truck drivers in Los Angeles have been towing ICE vehicles, saying, sorry, bro, it's an unmarked car, doesn't have permission to park here. So tow truck drivers have been organizing themselves to remove ICE vehicles from the premises. Federal agents thought that they could stay at hotels, and people have been showing up at hotels, particularly the Marriott, to tell ICE agents that they are not welcome here. There is a group that is playing mariachi music in the middle of the night to make sure ICE agents can't sleep. There are restaurants in Los Angeles that are organizing together to say, hey, if you get a big order, that order might be going to ICE agents. And maybe you don't want to fill that order, right? So people are organizing in all of these ways to show ICE that they're not welcome here. And that even if owning a taco spot can't necessarily take down ICE as an institution, they can refuse to participate in the functioning of ICE. So that's really what we're getting at, is how are we able to remove our participation to stop these systems from functioning? And we need to do that en masse. So, Phineas, I'm not sure if you have the ability to scrub through this video. We're going to watch an amazing video.
Dominoes. What you may not know is that a domino can knock over another domino, which is about 1.5 times larger.
Phineas, are you able to scrub?
Chain of dominoes.
There we go. Okay, we're not going to get deep in the science of dominoes, but we want to show you the domino effect. Everybody ready? Let's go.
13 dominoes. The largest domino, it weighs about 100 pounds.
Still a little bit of science about dominoes. All right, here we go.
Ooh.
So I just want to reiterate that when repression increases, so does resistance, right? And actually, small acts can really build up when they are done in mass, when they are done in a sustained way. If ICE cannot participate, if ICE is unable to function because people keep showing up day after day after day after day, right? At some point, ICE is just not able to detain people. So we love this video because it shows our power, and it shows our power to take on targets that are much bigger than us. In this video, we see that you can influence a domino that's bigger than you, even the biggest one. If you set it up properly, the bigger ones will fall because the small domino fell. And also, you can directly push on a domino that's bigger than you. So if you're one person, you can organize a scale larger than you, say, for instance, 10 people. If you don't go trying to get the whole country to do something, You have to find bigger groups of people that are already organized or that you can organize, right? But so the idea is that we need to participate in these actions together, collectively, in big numbers and for big periods of time, right? And in order to do that, we need to build up our calisthenics. We need to build up our resistance calisthenics, our non-cooperation calisthenics. And I'm going to hand it over to Tabitha, who's going to talk a bit more about how non-cooperation can be organized in such a way to make the regime backfire. Tabitha?
Yeah, thanks, LJ. And yeah, as we are building our muscle and practicing our calisthenics and getting better at this and bringing in more and more people to our movement, there are things that authoritarians are still going to try to do and have been doing throughout the history of this country and countries around the world to try to drive wedges, tear us apart, and prevent us from keeping those people in this movement. And so what we wanted to be able to share with y'all is that there are movement scholars who have studied how movements operate and respond in really repressive environments around the world. And they found that as movements were growing and becoming more successful and getting those wins, authoritarians too were trying to use different tactics to put them down. And a scholar named Brian Martin actually studied this and coined the term backfire in the backfire framework. And he found that there are 5 things in particular that these folks who are trying to enact and get away with political violence and repression will do so. The first thing we'll do is they'll try to cover up the injustice. And as I'm going through these things, please feel free to add in the Q&A examples of where you've seen this in your community or in the country or in other places in the world. They'll try to cover up the injustice. They'll try to act like it didn't happen. Oh, that wasn't really, an insurrection on January 6th. That was a peaceful protest. Oh, like that wasn't actually can we go back? Thank you. That wasn't actually an illegal traffic stop or an intimidation tactic. I was just trying to protect my community, right? We've all heard those examples and maybe even experienced some of those things. The second thing they'll try to do is devalue the target or victim. They'll try to make it easier for people to get away with dehumanizing others and try to make it really hard for the rest of society to connect with them. Right, yeah. It isn't genocide, it's national defense, right? These people had it coming. They incited this violence. The third thing that people might try to do to get away with this violence or oppression is they'll try to reinterpret what happened in their favor. Oh, actually, what I was trying to do was keep my community safe, or this person wasn't where they should have been, or look suspicious as they were going through our neighborhood, right? So they'll try to reinterpret what happened in their favor instead of giving in to the fact that what they were doing was wrong and violent and unlawful. The fourth thing that folks will try to do is hijack official channels to give false sense of due process. This can look like slowing down of a judicial system or court cases, throwing different roadblocks into a legal process or a process for a bill to become a law, right? And then the fifth thing they'll try to do is intimidate and bribe. So as they seek to divide and sow fear among people, they'll try to intimidate people into keeping silent and making them feel alone and like other people can't connect with them. And they might try to bribe others in society and say like, okay, well, at least you're not, for example, trans people, right? So we'll, if you stay silent here, or if you stay silent against this marginalized community in your area, you won't have to worry about, fear or threats or intimidation. Yeah, I'm just looking at the chats and Q&A. Thank you. At the same time, there are things that Brian Martin found that movements do to successfully respond against things that people do to try to get away with political violence and backfire. And those things are what we call the backfire framework. And the whole purpose of this framework is to try to impose direct costs and losses on people perpetrating violence, whether it's economic losses or loss of job, loss of social standing, maybe loss of political office, and equally, and if not more important, really be able to stand in solidarity with communities that are being targeted so that they feel less alone, so that instead of those communities feeling isolated or attacked, they actually have more people rallying to their cause, rallying and standing in solidarity with them. And it just becomes less, less optimal for folks to continue trying to attack them and continue to try to sow violence. So in place of covering up an injustice, we reveal. We expose the injustice. That can look like taking photos, video footage. LJ was just, sharing some great tactics that people were doing to try to show what's happening in LA and what's happening in a lot of communities right now when it comes to ICE detentions and raids. The second thing that we can do is redeem. We can validate the target. In the face of that dehumanization, we can say, no, this is a human being. This is a person who is worthy of dignity. And this is a person who is part of your community, and try to do things to make it easier for people to see themselves in that person and be able to connect with their story. The third thing that we can do is reframe. So interpret the event as an injustice. When they say, oh, no, like this actually wasn't as bad as we thought, or we were just trying to keep our community safe, we can say, no, actually, what you were doing was harming our community. You were attacking one of our community members. You were making it unsafe for key members of our community who are contributing because they're going to work. They're contributing economically to our community. They're showing up in our churches. They're in our schools. You're actually making our community less safe by going after them. The fourth thing that we can do is mobilize support to not rely on official channels by redirecting that support into things like strategic nonviolent action, into things like mutual aid and other ways to express solidarity and support, so that we're not just relying on those official channels, especially when they may be hijacked. And then the fifth thing that we can do is resist those intimidations and bribes. It's how are we thinking about how we're talking to one another and sharing information when we see people trying to do this in our community, seeing like, how do you want us to be able to show up for you in the face of it, especially when you know that there are traditionally targeted folks that might live next door around the block. Let me go to the next slide. So just to kind of encapsulate the backfire framework in response to the authoritarian playbook and repression that we may see, if we know that a would-be dictator's goals are to divide and rule and wear us down and make us feel exhausted and being able to kind of pick us off one at a time, to sow confusion and distract us, to provoke violence sometimes and keep us from maintaining that discipline, or even avoid creating trigger events to prevent even more mobilization, we have a set of goals too and ways that we can respond, in addition to really making that plan for backfire. We can play as a team. We can think about how can we slow backsliding, not just at the national level, but also thinking about things that are happening in our community. How can we stop it? What are some things that we can do? How can we activate within our pillars and think about how we might be able to build from our own individual actions? And some of the great examples that I saw people posting in the Q&A individually, to things that we can do in small groups, to things that we can do as a wider community, and then reverse it. So how are we also thinking about not just stopping it, but also modeling the type of democracy and community in which we're showing up for one another and modeling the society we want right now. And part of that is caring for one another to stay in the fight. I've talked to so many people who are feeling tired or exhausted in this moment, and that's real. And so we have to have real, honest conversations with ourselves, especially with the sphere of how we're caring for one another, how we're helping one another stay resilient, and what we are doing and what we're doing for one another to be able to stay in this fight in the long run, and having real, honest conversations about that. Cutting through confusion, identifying red lines is another thing that we can do. Thinking about what that looks like with the people that you organize with, what that might look like for, again, as LJ was mentioning, unlikely allies who are being activated in different ways in this moment. things that remaining nonviolent and trying to make sure that we have a set of nonviolent discipline within our movement and organizing groups, because we know if we do that, it's easier for people to get involved, and we're more likely to get more people to organize and show up with us, and develop that capacity for rapid mobilization together, which is part of what this training is all about. So I think I am actually taking us into a break. We're going to have a 10-minute break. You can see there we go. We prepared in case we were running a little bit behind. So come back 10 minutes at 7:23 Eastern time now. So come back at 33 minutes past the hour. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. We are on a 10-minute break. I have some things to say. I have some things to say for the chat. I know that for a lot of you, it might be new that you're watching leftist training for the first time, or this is something that's unfamiliar. I am getting a little bit frustrated because I'm seeing, quite frankly, a lot of conservative bullshit talking points in my chat about what's going on right in front of us. You guys are trying to take what's going on and fit it into the conservative bullshit framework that's been given to you by conservative influencers who don't understand the left. That's not your fault. It's not your fault that your influencers have lied to you. But what I will say is the constant making shit up in the chat about this isn't what these people are saying. This is actually what they're saying. And this is actually part of a larger agenda. And this is actually what's going on. And they're just hiding their true intentions. And they're trying to do this and trying to do that, but they're not saying it. Everyone needs to calm the fuck down. We are inside their private training right now. This is a private training. This is like being a fly on the wall in their private discussions so you guys can hear what they talk about when they don't think people like us are listening. Thank you, Scott, for the super chat. I also want to thank Donnie for the super chat earlier, and Donnie for becoming a new member on the channel. Really appreciate you guys. The point I'm trying to make, though, is that trying to fit this all into a conservative bullshit narrative defeats the entire purpose of listening to it in the first place. You guys have got to accept, and I know I have a lot of newer viewers lately. I know some of you might be seeing content like this for the first time. I am not trying to make you feel bad. But what I will tell you is that trying to fit what the left is doing into a conservative bullshit narrative does not actually serve you. It doesn't help you understand the left. They're not putting on a show right now. This is not, I understand it might seem confusing because you're watching it on YouTube and you're used to seeing entertaining videos on YouTube. What we are watching is not for your entertainment. What we are watching is an activism training that is happening in a private environment where they don't think people like us are watching them. They are telling you what they're doing. They are telling you what they believe. They are not planting information because they want to throw people off the track and it's really something else entirely. This is what they really think. This is the unfiltered version of what they think. This is how they behave. This is how they organize. We've already gotten a lot of great stuff in this. They are telling you what to do. And I'm going to be honest, I saw some people earlier bitching in the chat. They're like, this is also liberal. No, Frank, you are weak. You are weak. I'm sorry. Frank is one of those people, I think you might be new here, but I'm going to tell you, you are very weak. You came in here like, I'm going to own the lips. I already had to ban you in my chat for a 5-minute timeout, bro. No, you don't, Frank. No, you don't. See, this is a time, Frank, when you need to shut the fuck up and listen to someone who knows better than you. If all the right did was to watch presentations like this and then organize exactly like the left does, the right would actually end up winning some cultural battles. The right thinks that because they won one election, they won the war. That's retarded. There's going to be a midterm election next year, and P.S., Republicans are going to lose that midterm election resoundingly. And then the Trump administration ain't getting anything done for the rest of the time Trump's in office. No, Frank, I just think you need to shut the fuck up. And in fact, I'm putting you in another 5-minute timeout right now so that you can no longer talk in my chat, because you are one of those special conservatives that needs to shut the fuck up and listen. Trump has basically one more year before he massively loses the midterms. And the left is just going to keep doing stuff like this the entire time. What conservatives should be doing, if they were smart, is learning from how the left organizes and taking the tactics and doing exactly the same thing with their ideas. Because whether you like the left or you don't, their tactics work. They had the largest single-day protest in American history on the No Kings protest. And what did we see? That was covered all over conservative media. It was a flop. It was a failure. No, it wasn't. It just provably was not a failure. You guys saw the graph they showed earlier in this presentation. The graph they showed is there's actually been significantly more protest activity across the entire country than there was in 2017. And summer is just getting going. We still have several more months of this that they've already planned out ahead of us. The left takes this seriously. The right does not. And that is why, ultimately, the left will always win. This is how they captured the culture, by doing stuff like this. The goal of the left right now is simply to stage a ton of events, and what they want to do is get people to come out to multiple events. They keep telling us this. The goal is not to change the government. The goal is not to get Trump to do anything. The goal is only to get 3.5% of the population out and going to protests and events consistently. That is all they're doing. They are trying to build a mass movement in the long term, because they believe that if they can get 3.5 to 5% of the population to come out and participate regularly in protests, then they are very literally going to be able to stop anything that Trump tries to do. And they're already telling you that. They're taking credit for Trump not having mass deportations. They're taking credit for Elon Musk not being in the government anymore. They're already saying we are having successes in what we're doing, and they don't even have any political power right now. There is a ton of this organizing stuff right now. We're doing a ton of these spy streams because they are organizing so many events and so many different ways for people to be involved. That is what they're trying to do. Get people used to going to trainings like this. Get people used to going out protesting. Get people used to holding a sign. Get people used to chanting a chant. They are doing top of the funnel work into their activism ecosystem. The right does not do this. And I think part of the challenge is that conservatives think these are all paid protesters. No, they're not. No, they're not. One of the biggest disservices that conservative influencers have done to their population is convince normal people that every single protester is a paid protester who doesn't have a job. It is such bullshit. There might be onesie and twosie paid organizers here and there, and they're not even making that much money, by the way. But the vast, 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 vast majority of these people are doing it for free in their free time because they want to. They're not doing it because they got a slice of pizza. They're not doing it because they got enough money for cab fare. They're not funded by Soros. They're not funded by USAID. If the bare minimum, if anything, they're funded by mutual aid, which is a topic that we're going to be getting into pretty soon. Not tonight, another day. But I want people to hinge into reality. The break is almost over. We watch these trainings for a serious reason. We want to know what the left is doing next. These presentations tell us what they are doing next in no uncertain terms. Do you guys want to know why I am better at predicting what the left does literally than anyone on the internet? Because I go to their trainings and listen to them, and no one else goes to their trainings and listen to them. They tell us what they're going to do in the trainings, and then they go out into the world and they do it. And they do it over and over and over again, and they don't allow any right-wing bullshit or any conservative narrative to stop them from doing what they want to do. So, No, you didn't. No, you didn't. If you think you saw the right seriously mobilize in the last 4 years, you need to spend a lot more time watching the left, because I have been involved in right-leaning organizing and the right hasn't done shit. You might think they have because you saw a protest or a rally here and there, but you're confused because you don't understand the left.
And if you can hear my voice, we'll go ahead and start coming back. Maybe finishing up getting that cup of coffee or water. And we're going to do a little bit of grounding. Oh, if we can share the slides again, we'll go ahead and get into a little bit of grounding and go through a couple of case studies. The first one will be one that hits closer at home and taking from our own history here in the US. And the second one will be focused on an international case study. And the purpose of this is to really help us think about the wide range of nonviolent action kind of tactics and approaches, and how we can start to think about how we act together and how we start to kind of orient ourselves from a place of not just compliance, but not complying, and defiance, especially when the system isn't upholding the agreement and the social contract with us. Awesome. Thanks, Phineas. All right, so the first case study that we'll go into, it comes from the US Civil Rights Movement, and specifically focusing on Selma and the march from Selma to Montgomery. So as many folks might be familiar here, and I should say I come from Georgia, and so definitely very familiar and loved visiting a lot of the memorials to the US Civil Rights Movement in the South when I was growing up. But racial authoritarianism and segregation has been a reality in the South for decades, and in particular, and since our country's founding, and in particular, in the 1950s and 60s, we saw coalitions of faith leaders, student organizers, lawyers, and other civil rights activists come together to form a broader movement for civil rights. And one of the inflection points, and really a turning point for this, if we think about it from a backfire approach and angle, happened in Selma, Alabama. So we want to share a video. It's about 12 minutes long, but kind of framed around the backfire framework to start to help us think about how folks can really organize and build our power together in the face of fear and repression. So I think, Phineas, you might have to click since you're sharing sound. And maybe turn it up a little bit if you don't mind. Can you try to turn it up? Yeah.
Selma, Alabama is cemented in American history as a place that sparked great change in 1965. But understanding how requires us to look back to the events of 1963, to the bombing of a church in Birmingham, Alabama, which killed 4 young girls, prompting public outcry.
I remember my mom saying this on more than one occasion, that it's immoral when people's children are being murdered to ask them not to do anything about it. And so their wheels started turning to answer the question, what is an alternative that we could work for? Their thinking went along the lines of, well, if we could vote, we could have public officials who are not also Klansmen, and we could protect our children because we would be able to have officials that could advance our interests and certainly keep out people who are trying to murder us and hold us back. So they wrote a proposal for a movement, the Selma Right to Vote movement, and they vowed that they were going to work until it happened on Black people having the right to vote all over the South.
Then, in February 1965, a young deacon named Jimmy Lee Jackson was shot by an Alabama state trooper during a peaceful march. The officer who shot him claimed that Jimmy attacked him with a bottle, but organizers worked to counter this false narrative and redeem Jimmy's character. During that march, state troopers beat Jimmy's grandfather. Jimmy, who witnesses said was unarmed, was trying to protect his mother from the same fate when he was shot. Jimmy died from his injuries 8 days later.
So my dad's original thing was, we need to take Jimmy Lee Jackson's body to the Capitol because I need to ask Governor Wallace, was this a mishap, an accident, or is this your policy to kill somebody?
So, on March 7th, 1965, hundreds of people mourning the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson began their planned 54-mile march from Selma to Montgomery. They hoped to avoid harm during their acts of civil disobedience, but they also knew the harsh realities of the segregated South and its pervasive racism.
The violence was going to be there. The question is, how are you going to counter it in a serious way? So you could throw some bricks, you could shoot some people maybe, but what's going to happen in response to that versus a really creative, very well organized and disciplined nonviolent movement? And I think that is the common misconception in terms of what nonviolence is. It's active. You think violent, you think nonviolent, which is like the absence of physical violence. But when we're talking about nonviolence in the community of organizers, scholars, advocates that, practice, study, employ nonviolence, we're talking about nonviolence with a capital N. So you're talking about a set of principles, a set of historical examples, historical movements that have been successful. You're talking about a body of work, a body of tools. I think that people would be surprised at how much research folks did, how organized they were about sharing that research with each other. James Lawson talks about that. My mother talks about that. They would make, and this is before computer generated everything. They would make maps and they would get the statistics on how many Black folks live in this county. And, they were serious.
In anticipation of the violence they would encounter, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee held nonviolent resistance workshops. They practiced responding to antagonization and violence with dignity, song, and prayer, and they made sure the world would be watching.
Of course, they could have just got in the car, they could have gotten in the bus and made it to Montgomery. But to dramatize the issue, to bring out the force of violence from the opposition is a nonviolent strategy, is a tool of strategic nonviolence to dramatize the issue of this long 2x2 march that we see the images of John Lewis and many others beaten almost to the point of death on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, is because of this historical faith tradition that Black Christian leaders, particularly in the civil rights movement, were using and were grounded in as principles. And all of those things, the power of sacred music, the power of community, all evident in the sort of civil resistance campaign in Selma.
The end of that day, now known as Bloody Sunday, dozens of peaceful marchers were injured and hospitalized. Videos and photos of the brutality they endured appeared on TVs and newspapers around the world and revealed state agents as perpetrators of the violence, not just individuals or groups of white supremacists. In particular, images of Black people in their church clothes being battered by white state troopers helped counter attempts to devalue marchers as an angry mob.
They were in their Sunday best because this represented an extension of their Sunday morning service, that this was an extension of their faith in action, and how the dignity that they embodied was challenged and threatened by the systems of authoritarianism and autocracy that continue to expose it. These are not people who are attempting to break the law or people to subvert the law or circumvent the law. These are individuals who represent the best of American society.
As organizers predicted, exposing these abuses led to widespread outrage that they were able to redirect into action.
One thing about strategic nonviolence is that it invites and welcomes all people, those who are differently able, those who have physical challenges, those who have gender nonconforming identities, that strategic nonviolence allows all of us to find a home and to allow all of us to find a place to be engaged. It allows us to all be on the front line, whereas if you were engaging in a strategic violence campaign, one would need to be trained on how to use their instruments or their weapons. But we all can use our weapons of love to be able to engage in the fight for justice and for peace and equality. And I believe that is what makes strategic nonviolence so important. It's what makes this moment around Selma and heightened awareness, is the fact that there was clear distinction between those who were embracing violence and those who were peacefully, non-violently confronting violent resistance with the power of love. And ultimately, those who were engaged in the nonviolent strategy won.
On March 9th, over 2,000 people led by Dr. Martin Luther King marched to the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where they knelt in prayer instead of crossing, avoiding further violence from the state troopers at the scene. In response, President Lyndon B. Johnson issued the following statement. Americans everywhere join in deploring the brutality with which a number of Negro citizens of Alabama were treated when they sought to dramatize their deep and sincere interest in attaining the precious right to vote. Days later, President Johnson gave a televised address.
Their cause must be our cause too. Because it's not just Negroes, but really it's all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice. And we shall overcome.
And on March 21st, organizers marched from Selma to Montgomery with the protection of federalized Alabama National Guardsmen and FBI agents. By the end of the 5-day journey, 25,000 people had joined the march, a powerful example of how nonviolent action can make violence backfire.
It's not just about trying to invoke or transform the consciousness of the opponent. It's also to win people to your side. I think that's a part of nonviolence that we don't often see as a victory, is that even if you don't change those who are putting on white sheets at night, you have engaged the demographic of those and the neighbors of those who put on white sheets, and you continue to allow the masses of those who have been untapped and unengaged and now begin to overpower those who become the silent minority moving forward. So I think there's a way to look at nonviolence as a way to attract, not always to just repel, but to attract more people to your side.
The power of these nonviolent strategies live on today as activists and advocates around the world continue to use these tactics to make violence backfire.
So that's a part of our rich tradition, is that even Rosa Parks was inspired by the murder of Emmett Till in 1955, and that's what motivated her ultimately to refuse to release her seat on the bus in Montgomery that led to the Montgomery bus boycott, is that we've always used these moments of triggers and trying to transform the nation through these moments of brutality, of devastation, of death, to transform the narrative, to be able to use that to chart a pathway to the future.
There are always people who want justice. But what you can do the week after George Floyd gets murdered is very different from what you're going to be able to do the week before or 3 years after. And so being aware of that as one of the variables in your strategizing and organizing is really important.
This tradition is one that is not just an ancient wisdom. It's very much so relevant for the times we're living in today.
Since I've grown, a new generation will continue to be. So bring your marching shoes, bring your band money, bring your ID, bring your soul.
We were fighting for racial justice in Louisville, Kentucky, and we were met with sort of police violence. We followed the same principles of nonviolence to allow political violence to backfire and for there to be ultimately a level of justice, if you will, and accountability for the officers who murdered Breonna Taylor, and a system that created and perpetuated a level of violence that ultimately took her life. And so I just want to encourage those who are listening. The fight may be daunting and may seem daunting, may seem like we're not making progress, but the moral arc of the universe is indeed long, and it does bend towards justice.
All right. So folks know you'll get a copy of these slides. We'll also drop the link if folks ask for it directly into the Q&A chat. I would like to go to the next slide, but maybe Phineas, I think you might have to do that for us. Thank you so much. So as folks here may know, there were a number of other really important campaigns and pieces of the U.S. civil rights movement that were able to lead to the long-term policy change at the state and federal level, some of which we see really being targeted and drawn back today at the state and federal level. And I think one of the things that really sticks out to me is just thinking about the sequencing of these different types of tactics that we've been talking about tonight, starting with the Montgomery bus boycotts and the noncompliance and non-cooperation strategy there, but also the mutual aid that had to happen, and the carpools that had to be set up to sustain an over a year-long boycott and protest, to the Nashville lunch counter sit-ins and the Freedom Riders. So just thinking about the strategic sequencing and how you can use different moments and trigger events and inflection points to bring more people in, to then be able to leverage that power in different ways. And I should note that if you want to see more about the ways that folks were leveraging these different types of tactics, there's a great documentary called A Force More Powerful that will be linked in these slides, and it includes a focus on the Nashville lunch counter sit-ins. Can go to, let me see if I can go to the next slide. There we go. So yeah, I would love to hear from folks in the Q&A. If folks just want to kind of call out what are some lessons that really stood out to you from this story. And Nadine, feel free to chime in if there are any that kind of come to mind at the top of your head.
Absolutely. I love the framing of the video, and all of it covers. Yeah, look, right away somebody saying incredible nonviolent discipline was showed in this over many, many years. Yep, exactly. And planning and training, right on. Incredible preparation and discipline. That's the biggest takeaway. And preparation that included not only training, but immense research and support, building out support networks for each other.
Seeing a lot on the importance of timing, regular people teaching regular people.
Yeah, totally
great. Mm-hmm. Shall we move on? Oh, great. And thanks. A lot of great summary points here from Paul. Shall we move to the next one, Nadine?
Yeah, and I would say too, it's really clear that in some of the comments here, how people recognize that in this moment, if you remain silent, you are actually on the side of the oppressors. I think that became very, very obvious to people in the civil rights struggle and throughout many of the other struggles that we talked about today, and we'll talk a little bit more about soon as well. So, yeah, let's go to the next one. We have another great story to share with you. Another great case study. And again, we will share all the links to this, to these things with you in the future. This case study comes from something called Force More Powerful, a collection of 6 short, they're 27 minutes long each. We're only going to watch 5 minutes of one of them to learn a little bit about the resistance to the dictator Pinochet in Chile. So let's go to the next slide. And actually, maybe I have the capacity. Right. So here's a little map in case people are not familiar where we're going to South America, beautiful country stretching along the Pacific coast. And one of the interesting things to think about as you watch this story in comparison with the one in the United States is that there had already been, in this little video clip that we're going to see, a very extensive repressive government in place for a long time. And actually, we'll just go in and we'll watch it, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what we get to. Let's see. I think actually, Phineas, you're going to have to play it, right? Because the sound will come through your computer.
By 1983, a severe economic crisis has pushed unemployment to 30%. As Chileans feel they have nothing left to lose, open opposition to the regime becomes thinkable for the first time. The first signs of opposition appear at the heart of Chile's economy, in the copper mines of the Andes Mountains. Miners are amongst Chile's best paid workers in the country's largest and most lucrative export industry. Their leader is 29-year-old Rodolfo Seguel, a payroll clerk at Chile's largest copper mine, recently elected president of the National Labor Congress. Seguel wants his members to take the first step, a nationwide strike.
10 años. 10 years had gone by and nobody had gone out into the street. We had to see what reaction the country would have, and then to see if the country would dare to do this. Our goal was to open people's eyes and to tell them, we can do it. It is possible. We can do this.
A week before the strike is to begin, Pinochet's troops surround the copper mines. Seguel knows that there will be bloodshed if the strike goes forward. They change their plans. Instead of a strike, they proclaim a national day of protest. With only a few days to prepare, they must mobilize not just union members, but the whole population.
I remember that morning. At the beginning, you didn't know if someone was walking slowly, driving his car slowly, or walking slowly on the sidewalk, because he was just taking a walk or because they were protesting. Until finally at noon, it was so obvious. It was so obvious that everything was slower. It was so evident that the city started to close down.
As darkness falls, no one knows whether the final overt act of protest will succeed. At exactly 8 p.m., it begins, tentatively at first.
And the next day, there was a sense of sort of, what did you do last night? Did you see it? Oh, yes, I was out banging my pots and pans with my neighbors. And so there was a real sense of complicity all of a sudden in a society where each human being had literally become a complete island.
All right, thanks for that. So we'll take a minute. We do have the Q&A feature. Love to hear from folks who are paying attention and maybe knew about the Chilean example earlier, or maybe are just learning about it. What do you take away from this particular short clip of the resistance movement? Approximately, I'd say midway in the fight against Pinochet. Pinochet was in power from 1973 until 1990. Activists and organizers and singers and artists and educators and religious folks eventually did force Pinochet out of office. But how about dropping in the Q&A some things that you took away from this? Yeah, so pots and pans, cacerolazas, people here in the United States might have had some experience with this when we beat on our pots and pans and rang out noise to support workers, particularly during COVID over the past bunch of years. There were a lot of people. This has happened absolutely before the internet and easy social media, if you will. The word got out to everyone via radio, via news, radio stories often, trucks that would go around and broadcast, and through lots of connections. One of the takeaways from the Chilean example is how all different sectors of society mobilized. We heard about an amazing strategic decision that the labor unions had to make, those who were working in the copper mines, which was the economic backbone of Chile at the time. And they realized that they would be basically destroyed and murdered if they didn't adjust instead and build up more of a capacity before they took on the Pinochet regime head on. Absolutely. Being so well organized as to shift tactics and to put in place things that are making it safer to do actions, which include things like disperse things like banging pots and pans, walking slowly everywhere, driving slowly, things that might be misconstrued as just being tired and not necessarily as resistance. Yes, exactly. So these are lower risk actions or actions that can be taken by different people in different ways. Absolutely. In fact, there was a lot of art and music, as is mentioned, and also it is well known that Pinochet took power from Allende in a violent coup that set the stage for a violent regime from the very beginning in 1973. And so it took this video that we saw is about 10 years in. And then after that, all these sectors of society worked together and were able to take advantage of a small opening where Pinochet assumed he was so popular that he would not be able to be voted out of office. And eventually, actually, he was voted out of office. And the community had to come together and be ready to do massive non-cooperation to make sure that the elections were honored. Right, absolutely. Tabitha, what are you noticing?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the similar things that you already called out, but just people being able to pivot and also thinking about what are the low risk actions and ways that people can engage in that moment, and even thinking about what are the kind of structures and stress tests that people can do to help them, like with the banging of the pots and pans and the cacerolazos, like to know how many people are actually participating, and then seeing that energy grow. Like this also slow and steady wins the race in the end.
Yeah, this is great. And life is not a spectator sport. Thanks for mentioning that. Absolutely. And I will say one of the other really important things, and there's another great movie, the International Center on Nonviolent Conflict has put out The Force More Powerful that covers this story in 27 minutes. However, there's another wonderful commercialized movie called No, which was the title of the campaign to actually vote Pinochet out eventually. And although the wording is negative, no, the entire symbolism of this campaign and this movement was positive, inviting people to a better future. We say no to repression. We say no to hatred. We say no to violence. We say no to dictatorship. We say yes to a better future for our families, our friends, and our communities. And their symbol was a rainbow. So I really encourage people to think about that in the work that we do and perhaps even watch that movie. Yeah. Anything else that you want to mention?
Nope, I think you got covered. Thanks, Nadine.
Awesome. Thanks
Lots
for
of great insights coming in the chat.
great. Yeah, great. And people are dropping a lot of links in here. And again, we'll send them out to you. All right. So I think we'll keep going. Let's see. The next one here is, look at this. The lessons are even here, which is great, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about how we use these lessons in a moment in our own situation for non-cooperation. But it's really important both in the civil rights example and in the Chilean example that it is critical that we keep using our civil society space. And one of the key rules that we keep in mind when we're dealing with authoritarians is that we should not obey in advance. We need to keep testing the boundaries. We need to keep making sure that we show up and act like we have agency, that we can do things. And that's really important. The second thing you'll notice here is that, and we've already talked about backfire, but we have to expect that we will face some kind of repression. It might be minor, but it might be extreme. And it's not like repression is what we're after. But if it happens, we need to be ready for it. We need to make it backfire or rebound. And that would include possibly putting in place a rapid response network to support people who are injured, maybe even move people if we need to evacuate them from a certain location. Obviously, extend solidarity with folks, humanize them, create make sure that people understand the real story of what happens and calling out what happens in reality so that we can build our capacity to respond collectively. And lastly, we need to be like water, right? Stay adaptable and not being stuck in one kind of tactic, not being stuck in doing something that's not working and doing it over and over again, and being willing. And this is one thing that being involved in a people power strategic nonviolent action movement allows you to do. You have to do it, and it allows you to be creative with what you've got going on. It's not just simple get a gun or get a weapon and do something. You have to be very creative and innovative in reaching people and building your numbers and in helping move and escalate what you can do to build your power. So those are some really important lessons for us as we watch what's going on. So we're going to jump into non-cooperation in a serious way. And why are we doing that? Well, one of the reasons we're doing that is because governments actually, in fact, don't do anything, right? You can see in this quote by Gene Sharp, who we mentioned earlier. He was a famous nonviolent action strategist. He talked a lot. He died. He wrote his treatise on nonviolent action in the 1970s and continued to support the movement. And this is really critical when we're thinking about the pillars of power and removing support from the regime. It comes really down to the fact that the rulers aren't really doing any of this work. We're doing it. The rulers don't manage ports, print money, and they don't even milk a cow. And so when we stop participating and we withdraw our consent, then we can actually make changes happen. And the rulers cannot rule without us. So we're going to continue in that vein and think about non-cooperation. So let's take a minute. This will be a little thought question for you all, and we'll use the Q&A again. Everybody's probably heard about Gandhi marching to the sea to make salt, right? The British had a monopoly on it. Everybody needed salt to live, and they charged outrageous amounts of money for salt. So Gandhi used this as a way to challenge the British Empire. He announced we were going to march to the sea to make salt. And they did that. By the time they got to the sea, there were thousands of them. Seems pretty easy, right? Get to the sea, let some water evaporate, and there, you've got salt. So without knowing more about this situation, what do you think actually went into this process? What did they need to do to carry it out? Let's have some comments in the Q&A. What went into this seemingly simple activity of marching to the sea and making salt? Let's take a minute. They had to have a solid goal or an end game. Eventually, people did leave the salt mines too. That was a secondary economic target. Yep. Oh, yeah. People needed ordinary things like how did they communicate? How did they carry water and buckets? How about that march? That was a long march, folks. What did they need to do to get there, get to the sea? Right. Logistics. Lots of logistics. Food, places for people to sleep. I think many of them walked barefoot, but good shoes would have been great. There needed to be a route planned. Right. Absolutely. Allies. Absolutely. All right. And we've just got a lot put in there, right? Somebody Googled quickly. Yes. And we needed local people. They marched from town to town. They slept open air. Gandhi held meetings to convince people to come with him at every step of the way, right? Absolutely. Great. So that's the beginning of the next section that we're going to look at. Really, what is going to go into all of these ideas that we have? So we talked earlier about what non-cooperation is. There's 3 large categories and hundreds of methods within the 3 large categories, right? So just to remind you, we talked about social, political, and economic non-cooperation. We're now going to go deeper into some of these. And, the word on the street is we should boycott. And in fact, there's very effective boycotts that we've mentioned already against Tesla, maybe even Starlink and others like this, and Target. When we start these things, there's real work that has to happen to make it possible, right? And there's been many effective boycotts over time. I love this picture of the Montgomery bus boycott because it encapsulates both the bus that was being boycotted and an alternative plan that people had to ride their bikes and to walk. This is also very critical with boycotts, figuring out what the alternative ways are to meet people's actual needs. So there's a bunch of questions here. We're going to share this with you and a whole document that will capture this. So if you want to use these conversations in your groups, in your local context, you can use them to figure things out. And Tabitha, since you're around, or if Daniel or
Dean, I was one thing that I'm realizing we can mention is the way that Tesla takedown has now shifted. So Tesla has been a major focus, and they've now been focusing on T-Mobile as a way to get to Starlink, right? So Starlink is the next one of Elon Musk's babies. And so they're attempting to run a new campaign. And so that's a great one for people to join in on. And so they're asking people to, at this phase, begin to ramp up boycott pressure on T-Mobile, the cellular network. So that would be another example of a boycott. We put a bunch of these up at boycottcentral.org as a way to connect what's out there in the world of boycotts these days.
Yeah, and there's so much going on, and there's leadership from, for example, the faith pillar on some of these boycotts, which is good to notice in addition to others. Great. We're going to also talk about worker strikes, right? This is another one that comes up a lot. People are saying, let's do a general strike, but who knows what actually it takes to do a general strike? Many people don't belong to a union and have never actually prepared for an officially called strike by a working group, by a trade union, and it involves a lot of planning. In fact, we've never had a national strike here in the United States or a general strike beyond a localized community. And all of the examples in the United States happened quite a long time ago. The Seattle General Strike in 1919 is one example. And in the 30s, there was the Flint sit-down strike, and there's support for this strike from other sectors. But this is really important, right? Testing, if you're part of a union, you know that you have to do some testing to see if your membership is ready to actually take on the bosses. And you test in a few ways. We call them structure tests. So a lot of questions to come in on this. Daniel, do you want to add anything on this one?
I didn't.
All right, so we'll keep going. I know you'll add in on the tax resistance, though. So lots of people earlier in this seminar were asking questions about tax resistance. How can I do it? Is it legal, et cetera, et cetera? There are both legal and illegal ways, or not so legal ways, of doing tax resistance. And it has been something that's been part of our nation's history from the very beginning, right? The American Revolutionary demand of no taxation without representation referred to how the colonists didn't want to pay taxes to the British regime. And that's been a part of our history. We can certainly draw on it now. Over time, there's been resistance against paying for nuclear weapons. There's been resistance for many things. And an easy way to do it might be to just delay paying your taxes, number one, or increasing the number of holdings that you have on your form so that the government doesn't take money out in advance of you owing taxes or to the excess of you owing taxes. But Daniel, do you want to talk a little bit about this tax strike business?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the more interesting angles on it, I mean, there is the long tradition of peace churches who've been not paying their taxes for war or so forth. They haven't stopped wars. And so that strategy isn't necessarily all about just efficacy, but also about a moral engagement. And it's also true that people, when they're morally engaged, they're more willing to do more things. So there's value for that, even if you're not, for example, whatever level of tax resistance you might be comfortable with. But there's another piece, which is also the more we're talking that language of if they're going to steal our money and not use it for the people, then we're not going to continue giving them that money. We're going to give it directly to the institutions that need it, to Medicaid, to Medicare, to care in our communities. And that logic actually helps people like Gavin Newsom, who recently said, maybe we as the state of California should not continue to give money to the federal government if you're going to occupy our cities. So that logic actually, I think, helps other states and other entities that are bigger than us in that sort of domino model also engage. So it's very early, people start exploring options. And so I think more consideration of what that could look like and so forth is great. But there's a group, taxstrike.info, who've been exploring how this might unfold.
That's great. Yeah. So we are going to go through 8 different kinds of non-cooperation today, which, as I said, is 8 out of hundreds of potential possibilities. One of them that might be really interesting to talk about is social non-cooperation. And this is when people refuse to participate or cooperate with social customs or events or institutions. It could look like, not receiving an award. It could look like denying a ritual practice like communion. It could involve lysistrata, which is a sex strike, right? And we really would encourage people to think about what it looks like in your own community. In where I live in Washington, D.C., there's something called the Kennedy Center, right? The National Performing Arts Space in D.C. that's been taken over by Trump. And what has happened on the regular is if some member of the regime shows up, there are often lots of people that boo them or make them uncomfortable since they've taken over the arts center, the Performing Arts Center, and really limited the diversity of what is offered there and the beauty of what can be offered from our whole community. One particular story that I'll share, and you can see there's a little image here, is that during Nazi Germany, many countries, including Denmark, put together rules of engagement, if you will, 10 commandments about how to relate to the occupying forces, about how you shall not do good work for the Germans, or you will not sit next to them on the bus, or you will not work with them, or speak with them. So lots of things like this could be an interesting place to think about in your community, how to make it an anathema to support the pillars of the regime. All right, we'll keep going. So here's another fascinating one, number 5, jury participation, or you might also know it as jury nullification. This is a not well known legal an actual official way of registering discontent with our system, whereby a juror or a jury, even if they think the person has committed a crime, refuses to set the charge as guilty. So they see people as not they list them as not guilty, and this has happened in many ways. It's a legal theory that has been tried, for example, during the slave rebellions, where there were laws that said you had to return enslaved people to their owners, and when the trials would come up, people would refuse to convict. This was during the fugitive slave laws. And the same thing happened with alcohol prohibition, where people refused to convict folks on laws that they knew were going to be overturned in some cases. And it is a very little known fact that you can engage this way in our judicial system. Many people often try to opt out of serving on a jury, but for some of us, this can be the most meaningful impact we have on our judicial system, and we can hold the law accountable. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on this, but there are lots of people working on this kind of education in many areas in the country. All right, we'll go to number 6, the alternative structures and systems. And this is really about people taking care of each other. We keep us safe. We provide for each other. There's been lots of conversations about if we do a boycott, if we do a strike, how do we provide services that people need while we are doing these alternative things? We might have to put in place our own governance systems. We might have to put in place our own environmental protection agency. We might have to provide healthcare for queer community or women who need reproductive care if it is outlawed by our establishment. And these are things that we have done throughout history, that many impacted communities have done through their entire existence here. And so we have a lot to learn from people who are engaging in mutual aid and all kinds of economic support structures and governance structures outside of the normal systems, quote unquote, normal mainstream systems that we have. And so it's really important to look around your community and see what's in place already and what we need to do as far as research or building capacity goes, so that we can put in place some of the other forms of non-cooperation. All right, let's do another one. This is one of my one of the more interesting ones to talk about: opposition fraternization. When we talk about the pillars of power and we think about the spectrum of allies, we can see ourselves either in the pillars, because people make up the pillars, or we can see our relationship to the people who are in the pillars. And in particular, talking about law enforcement, or talking about military, or talking about ICE agents. Maybe we are not them, but maybe we are their families or their communities or their friends. Or maybe we figure out that we need to reach out to them and offer them a future that looks better than exerting power through violence over others. And fraternization offers a way to do that. There are great stories. This is a picture from the Vietnam War era, where there was a lot of fraternization that happened, trying to convince troops to defect and people to refuse to fire on their loved ones or their family members. This is famously one of the reasons why the Serbian fight against Slobodan Milosevic was successful, because at a point when Slobodan Milosevic, the dictator, was refusing to concede the election, and masses of nonviolent protesters gathered in the streets and in the squares, and the order was given to fire on the protesters. The military refused to do it because they were either actually familiarly related, or they knew the people, or they were in the communities of the folks who were in the crowd and felt that they did not want to harm each other. All right. So we're going to keep going because I think I have one more. Number 8, and pointing this one out this is the one to talk about internal or civil society action. Federal workers in particular in the United States have a particular role to play of gumming up the works or putting a spanner in the works, doing things that you might know as malicious compliance, or thinking about how to slow down implementation of illegal laws, how to refuse to do actions that are against your constitutional oath. It could be as simple as, spilling your coffee in a copy machine, inadvertently, of course. It could be as complicated as making sure that the laws are adhered to the letter. And we'll share resources with you about thinking about what that looks like currently in our society. And hopefully, if you're in that community, you'll find some of these guides useful. There's also one of the pictures here, one of the little thumb nails is of a sabotage guide written by the CIA back in the day about how to slow down the opponent's activities in World War II. And a lot of that could be of interest to folks today as well. All right. Does anybody on our crew want to add anything else from this while we were talking? Because we're going to take a minute. Oops, let's go to the next one. So we do still have capacity for Q&A. So what I would love it to do, and for some reason, there it is. So here's the 8, in red, you can see the 8 different forms of non-cooperation we just went into depth about. Economic boycotts, labor strikes, tax resistance, social non-cooperation, opposition, fraternization, building alternative structures and support, judicial engagement or jury nullification, and internal civil servant action. If you were going to explore one of these to use in your local context, which one would you look at, or which ones would you look at? Feel free to drop a note in the Q&A and let us know what you're interested in working on. What do you think? Anyone got it here? Opposition, fraternization, yeah. Tax resistance, boycotts, alternative structures, absolutely, especially in the rural area, absolutely. Right, tax resistance, all of them, yeah. Alternative structures and social non-co-op, boycotts, and absolutely, I mean, we can do boycotts at a national level, we can do fraternization at a local level, right? Really appreciate this, great. Excellent. Thanks for this. And I'm going to just close out this section with one of my all-time favorite quotes by Alice Walker. She said, the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. And I hope through our work today, looking at the pillars of power, looking at what non-cooperation is, everyone can see that they have some power to exercise in this fight against authoritarian consolidation. So I think we're going to keep going. And I'm going to hand this over to who? I think it's me. Here we go. We're going to keep going, right? Or LJ. Actually, I think I'm giving it back to LJ, right? Or Daniel, are you taking it?
Yeah, we weren't very sharp on this part, but I'll read this one and then LJ can take on the next one. So this is a quote from someone from Nicaragua. And I just want to encourage you to just kind of sit and hold it as I read it aloud. So dear all-American friends, first and foremost, you are not alone. Please know this and hold it close to your hearts, because beyond the hard truths of this moment, there are millions of people around the world who have felt like you, and who, like you too, have stood up against authoritarian tyrants and their oppression. It is true that this is a time where everything feels shocking and overwhelming. But just as we have resisted abroad, your determination and resistance is keeping hope alive. I'm from Nicaragua, and I've lived through oppression and exile, through the painful passing of time, and even the temptation of finding refuge in passive stability. But me and all Nicaraguans continue to stand up, in exile and internally. refusing to let our hopes for democracy and a prosperous, inclusive future die not only in our country, but the world. Tyrants fall. Look at Syria, look at history. Yes, it is complicated, it is messy, but it's a historical fact. This is a global fight for global democracy. We need to stay strong, connected, and close to each other. Beyond the US border, you have allies who are rooting for you and ready to offer the support that you need. So count on us and know that you are not alone.
Thank you, Daniel. This is from an ally in Kenya. As we look back since January in disbelief of how fast democracy has crumbled and caved into despair, we, your allies, fighting our struggles across Africa, are reminded that it didn't start this year. This is a story that has taken many turns and twists, and for those who have been around longer, could be a cycle. We have been here before, and that should be assurance that there are brighter days ahead. This is yet another opportunity for everyone to reimagine a world for everyone without war and prejudice, rather where the laws of nature apply. There can be nowhere better to learn from than nature. We choose hope because only those that find the inner hope and belief will keep at it. These are difficult days to be hopeful, and we must find it because only then are we going to organize and mobilize better, wiser, like never before. We must find light in the chaos of this moment to build the bridges of a new narrative, one that is not about othering, but convergence in divergence. America's influence is unquestionable, as seen in this moment, so the more reason why you must organize within and without. A luta continua. And then lastly, who is this from, Daniel?
Tabitha's going to describe it. Tabitha, why don't you
Great.
take it?
Sure. Yeah. So this comes from an ally who is a women peace builder and activist in Afghanistan. She says, I've dedicated my professional journey to advancing the lives of women and children that come from my own experience growing up as an underprivileged refugee and a member of a minority group that has always struggled for resources and opportunities to move a little bit. Today, the world feels even more in turmoil to me as the rights of vulnerable groups are stripped away and speaking out on their behalf can cost someone's life. Yet I still believe that in the face of repression, resistance is an act of hope. Seeing the women and girls of Afghanistan, my homeland, push back against anti-women policies of the Taliban, whether through protests in the streets or quiet defiance in their private spaces, fills me with determination. Witnessing Afghans in exile knocking on every possible door to demand change for their country reminds me that every step we take in nonviolent resistance echoes across borders, reaching those of us who fight in silent spaces. I see people around the world refusing to stay silent in the face of injustice. Their courage fuels ours, just as our resilience strengthens theirs. My final message is this. We must stand together against injustice to build a world that we and future generations deserve, one rooted in love, respect, and dignity.
So we just want to say thank you to all of you for participating in this. We wanted to share, so we will share all these slides. If you go to freedomtrainers.net, we're hosting a whole bunch of different non-cooperative resources. We're continuing to add those. Maybe by tomorrow we'll have even more as we just keep adding and adding. And at the moment, we've been adding a lot of these sort of slide decks about different training agendas and also some resources as you're thinking about some of the different pillars. So we're, again, scrounging and building this along the way. So if you have one that you're particularly connected to, that you like have some resources, send them our way. And you can get in touch with us on the Freedom Trainers network. We're offering this as one gift out into the movement because our belief is that we are powerful together. We are able to do this. There's many organizations who are working on this. There's organizations like Free DC that Nadine has been working with and training. She's been running, Nadine's been running thousands of people have been going through these trainings where they have a website where you can join them if you happen to be in DC. There's organizations like 1 Million Rising. Some of you are connected to that. That's coming out of the No Kings. And they'll be running their own training series that's about developing like local groups. So if you're if you're feeling a little disconnected, that may be a way to plug in. And also there's groups like Solidarity Pledge. I'm just naming a few that come to my mind. Solidarity Pledge, who's just solidaritypledge.org, where they've been specifically thinking about how do we build support for immigrants in terms of facing deportation, detainment, arrests, violence, pressure. And so they've been building a structure to sort of offer some of the different resources. So there's lots of organizations out there. And if you're feeling disconnected, do feel free to reach out to us and see if we can support connecting. But there's a lot out there. And I think we want to just acknowledge and observe that. We don't have a next date for this next training. This was our first thing like this. Actually, we haven't created our own public entity, and I think we'll hone, and so certainly if you have feedback, we'll take all of that. You saw our tech challenges, and we don't need feedback on our tech challenges because we got that. We'll get better. But I think we also want to just invite you to settle in with your own self and just take away any of these different pieces that folks want to take away. So I'm handing it to one of my co-trainers who's going to take just the last piece. I think that's LJ. But again, we just wanted to close with appreciation. I hope it's okay. We didn't take all the time. We want to have a sense of abundance in this moment where we've had so much scarcity. We will send out slides. They will have the links, et cetera, et cetera. Thanks for all the positivity that people are putting in on the Q&A at the moment. I'll hand it over to you, LJ.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to shout out that we had, 693 comments from folks. So shout out to you all for all of your engagement throughout this training. Excuse me. Like Daniel said, we're going to send you out slides. We're going to send you out resources. We're going to send you out links to groups that you're going to be able to join. And one thing that you can do leaving here is just start talking to people, right? We want to start talking to people about the moment that we're in, understanding the changes to our political landscape, and most importantly, how we can use non-cooperation and non-compliance as strategy and tactics to meet this moment. So please leave, please talk to people, please talk to your friends, coworkers, and neighbors about this. And again, we are just so appreciative of your time, energy, and commitment. Thank you so, so much for joining us. And everybody take care, be safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Recording stopped.
We're done. All right. Well, that was an interesting training. Actually, I thought that was a really productive use of our time. So let me just go over some of the key highlights. Hang on. So, I mean, they were flat out talking about exactly what they're going to do, guys. All the different forms of non-cooperation. They were talking about creating a civil resistance movement. They were talking about all the different types of action. They're talking about like the sheer volume of protests that they already have. I think it's very, very clear. The left feels very empowered right now. The left believes they're winning right now. The left believes the Trump administration is making decisions based on their protests. Now, whether or not that's true doesn't actually really matter. What matters is the left believes it's true, and therefore they will make decisions based on that being true. And if they're looking at something and they're saying, holy shit, we're stopping mass deportations, we're getting Elon Musk out of the government, they're going to keep doing those things regardless of if you personally feel like they're telling the truth. It doesn't matter. What we're trying to do is figure out what are their next behaviors. And whether or not you agree with the basis of rationale for those behaviors, that doesn't matter. What matters is they understand their motivations, they understand what they believe, and they are going to act in accordance with what they believe, not in accordance with what you, random person on the internet, not in accordance with what you believe. Let's see, they're talking about all the different types of non-cooperation. I thought like one of the lines that I really took note of is when they were talking about the government employees all got in signal groups and started coordinating against the Trump administration like on day one. I thought that was, and then they worked with the unions and then that trickled into cabinet members. That was a great moment. And it really kind of let the quiet part out loud. They're talking about doing a mass boycott. I keep telling people that I have heard the left is either going to try to do a mass boycott in either 2026 or 2028. I don't know if they can get it ready in time for 2026, but they definitely want to do one, and they've been talking about doing one for like at least a year now. Let's see. I thought that them talking about tow truck drivers removing vehicles in Los Angeles that they thought were ICE. I thought they specifically doxed the Marriott Hotel as a place that ICE employees stay. And that was very purposeful. The way she was like, "End the Marriott." It was like, it was so purposeful. So I thought that that was actually an interesting moment. They're talking about expanding their protest from Tesla to T-Mobile because T-Mobile aids in the Starlink stuff. They talked about a general strike. They gave people options for what they want to work on. And again, the most important thing that people need to understand is that the goal right now for the left, the only goal right now for the left, is to give people protests and direct actions and trainings to engage in. They're trying to create a top of the funnel. People who are in sales understand this. They're trying to create the top of the sales funnel. They're trying to get as many people as possible to come out to a single protest or a single training or a single event. That's your top of the funnel. And then one level down in the funnel is, okay, you've gone to one event. Now we need you to go to 2. And now we need you to go to 3. They're trying to get people in the top of the funnel of their social ecosystem. This is the only goal that they have. They've been saying this for weeks. Their next goal after the No Kings protest is to get 3.5% of the entire population to participate consistently, showing up to multiple events. Because they believe if they can get 3.5% of the population to participate consistently across multiple events, then they will very literally be able to stop anything the Trump administration tries to do. And guess what? The No Kings protest got them like halfway there already. So they are actually making shockingly good progress. And this continues to be unreported in conservative media, essentially, because conservative media is lying to their audiences and saying the No Kings protest was a total failure. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It did exactly and explicitly what they wanted it to do. And you know that because you're hearing them say that directly. You don't have to trust me. You don't have to take my word for it. I never do pinky swear. Trust me, bro. You've heard them say it. You heard them talk about the 3.5% on this very call. I didn't put that there. We just knew it was going to be there because we listen to them an awful lot. So that concludes our spy stream for tonight. Do you guys want to see what I was reacting to? Which is a little bit drama-y. Okay, if you're not, this is a very brief moment of drama. Okay, very brief moment of drama. I feel like I've earned it. Yeah, just like how everyone asks Karlyn what can be done, they have tons of activities and actions to refer people to who are doing the work. The right doesn't have anything for people to do. It's like, all right. Do you guys know Frank McCormick? Frank McCormick is a psychotic person on Twitter who posts pictures that he's photoshopped of me literally all the time. Frank likes to talk almost every single day about how ugly I am on Twitter. He likes to Photoshop pictures of me to make me look like I weigh significantly more than I do. He likes to, he's an asshole. Essentially, he's off his medication. We know this. Well, Frank, about an hour ago, posted a picture of himself, a current picture of himself. Do you guys want to see what Frank McCormick, who makes fun of my looks all the fucking time, do you guys want to see what Frank McCormick actually looks like today based on a picture that he posted on his own fucking timeline? This is the man spending all day tweeting about me. This is the man who has an archive of AI art pictures of me on his phone that he's made, and he posts about them all the time. This is the man who believes that he's totally hot, bro. Shalom. I saw this and I was like, bro. See, the thing is, Frank likes to make fun of my looks. I'm on video 6 days a week. People know what I look like. You know what I look like. I'm not hiding. People are like, you have the microphone in a certain way, or you're wearing your hair in a certain way. And I'm like, I will pull my hair up. Like, who the fuck cares? People always like, you're catfishing people on the internet. I'm like, I'm on video, motherfucker. And then we have people like Frank McCormick, who never posts pictures of himself anymore. He uses pictures from several years ago when he still looked like a normal human being. But this is what the internet has done to Frank. This is what the internet has done. Frank is gaining a little bit of weight, isn't he? Gaining a little bit of weight. Yeah, everyone's gaydar is going off. Yup. Uh-huh. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, he's got porn producer vibes. Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. Yeah. But it's just like, kids. When you're toxic all day, every day on the internet, this is what you turn into. Right here. So, thank you, Frank, for sharing this photo with us. Thank you. We appreciate you sharing this photo with us. It's pretty great. Anyway, guys, that's going to wrap it up for the stream. Again, if you want to support the work I'm doing, the very best place to do so is over on the Substack. Thank you to everyone who sent in super chats throughout the stream. Thank you especially to Tolkien Fan, who gifted 5 channel memberships. That was pretty great. Congratulations to everyone who got a free channel membership from Tolkien Fan. Let's see. My Substack is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. You can sign up there for $8 a month, $80 a year. I am 100% independently funded by you guys, and I really appreciate you allowing me to take you inside leftist trainings. There is another leftist training scheduled for tomorrow, so we will be doing another spy stream tomorrow. This one's going to be shorter. This one's only going to be an hour long. It's called Workers Over Billionaires, May Day to Labor Day. And it's kind of by the same kind of like No Kings people again, or the Mayday Strong people again. If I wasn't married, you would ask me out on a date? Well, I appreciate that. I'm a fun time to hang out with. And if nothing else, you might get to hear my Southern accent. And if nothing else, I will make sure we drink a good beer on that date. We will have a quality craft beer experience. No IPAs. Though. No IPAs. Anyway, I'm going to do my regular stream tomorrow at 5 p.m. And then at 8 p.m. we're going to come do this Workers Over Billionaires thing. And it's going to be great. And I may be doing another stream tonight. Maybe. It will be a drama stream, but I have things I want to say. I have things to say. I'm about 75% sure I'm going to say them on the internet. 25% maybe keeping them to myself for right now. But I'm inching closer to the it's time to say the things I would like to say. Because I've been holding back on the things that I want to say for a really F-off long time to try to placate someone's feelings. And I'm a little bit bored with it. I'm just not there anymore. Not there anymore. Sometimes it's a little bit too long of a wait. So we'll see. I'm going to take a little break. I'm going to go get some dinner. But if you see me coming back on the internet to talk about some stuff, just know it's a drama stream and it's not supposed to be official work. I'm in off hours now. All right. So that is all I have. That's all I have. Thank you guys for hanging out for a spy stream. Appreciate you all. And da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. All right. Bye, guys. We'll see you soon.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here? eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.